Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Alberts?
Here.
Mr. Begnuski?
Here.
Ms. Berkedal?
Here.
Dr. Garcia?
Excused?
Dr. Jimenez?
Here.
Mr. Banka? Mr. Banka?
Here.
Mr. Neumeister?
Excused?
Dr. Sprague?
Here.
Ms. Sukla?
Excused? A quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of August 19th, 2024 is called to order and will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board, and I would entertain a motion at this time with a second to approve the agenda as submitted, unless there's a motion to amend.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Okay.
Second.
All right, moved by Mr. Manka, seconded by Dr. Sprague to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion has carried. We'll move on to public speakers. We do not have anyone registered to speak this evening, so we will move on to our school showcase. And we will have the Executive Director of GROW come up to the podium. And looking forward to this presentation. So if you would please introduce yourself.
I will. I'm going to make sure that I'm hooked up here. All right.
Perfect.
Good evening. My name is Kari Bursagal-Borelli. I'm Executive Director of GROW Lacrosse. I do wear other hats. I am a parent of a recent graduate from the school district of La Crosse, and I have an 8th grader. I also have subbed in the district, and I taught summer school. So lots of connections. So tonight I'm wearing that hat of Executive Director. I was a co-founder of the organization, and it was 2012 when our work with the community and our collaboration with the school district of La Crosse began. GROW is a nonprofit organization that was started by a few parents and community members concerned about students who show up to school hungry, understanding that hunger and undernourishment have detrimental effects on learning and focus. They were also seeing students having to take veggies and fruit on their trays in the cafeteria, but then throwing them away, and instead eating foods that wouldn't nourish them to their fullest, including my own children. Those parents dug in, did the work and research to find a way to make a positive difference in the way school-aged children saw food, with a goal of seeing students choose fresh, healthy foods, while also engaging with nature as one of their teachers. Hands-on garden-based education has been shown to double the amount of produce students consume. It became our mission to connect youth to healthy food and nature through hands-on garden-based experiences to nourish growing minds and bodies. We now do the work of that mission in school gardens, farm experiences at Deep Roots Community Farm, as well as a greenhouse space and doing field trips there on Western Technical College's campus. Like I said, GROW has collaborated with the School District of La Crosse since 2012, helping to transform spaces of the schoolyard into outdoor classrooms and providing quality curriculum-connected lessons to all students in each school. Currently, we collaborate with 7 of the 10 elementary schools in the district. Because each class and each student has the opportunity to participate in each lesson, approximately 1,800 students engage in a garden lesson 3 times in the spring and 3 times in the fall. We have highly qualified teachers and interns that provide all of our curriculum-connected programming. Our educators often become an embedded part of the school community. Teachers and students are excited about garden lessons, as evident in surveys that we give each season. Most seasons we have about 95% participation, unless of course the rain gets in the way or they just cannot come out. So I can tell you all of this with words, but I do think that photos really can tell the story. And of course, children in those photos doing fun things is even better. So State Road Elementary School was our pilot school. We worked with administration, teachers, and parents to develop the idea of that garden space and eventually in the next year, starting some programming. This is Hamilton Soda 1 Community School. Initially, it had garden space right on the playground, which was kind of a neat aspect, but with the new addition, we had to move that. So it currently occupies what used to be an empty lot, and that's kind of kitty corner from the actual school building, but students go over there for their garden lessons. Spence Elementary, very large space full of fruit trees and pollinator plants and lots of garden art. Hinchin Elementary, they named it Hug or Hinchin Urban Garden. It has a Hmong demonstration garden highlighting plants typically grown in the Hmong culture. Now, as you can see from the photos, the goal is to bring a sense of curiosity and awe to learning. We want to instill a sense of hope and empowerment for students. And then there's Northwoods International. Lovely garden right on the playground. And I guess I want to express too, in my 20 years of teaching or so, some of the most powerful teaching moments actually have come while teaching and learning with students in the garden spaces. Gardens provide so many opportunities for those aha or whoa moments, and a space for inquiry and wonder. I've seen gardens transform students as students discover and thrive in an educational world outside of the four walls of their classroom. I've seen a change also in behaviors and in their confidence. Here we have Summit Environmental School. This is a beautiful garden that has actually been supported by passionate retired teachers, which has been really neat to see. And you might even recognize a VIP guest in one of those photos on Wisconsin School Garden Day. Thank you, Dr. Engel, for being there. So gardening allows for an even playing field in that it transcends any language, intellect, social, economic, racial, cultural, or physical ability. So a couple other things I just want to highlight. We do programming also at a greenhouse at TC's campus. In 2020, as GROW merged with Hillview Urban Agriculture, GROW gained access to a state-of-the-art greenhouse space within the Horticulture Center on TC's campus. We piloted the program of field trips for 3 years with Hamilton students and then with some 7th graders. We learned a lot, and then during the winter of 2024, we were able to host 1,100 students within that space. We were able to show students different types of growing, including hydroponics and aquaponics. They've learned the mechanics of how a greenhouse operates. We have been able to show pollination and how that happens actually indoors. We worked with the district science curriculum coordinators to be able to start to incorporate this field trip experience with 2nd, 4th, and 7th graders. So during the field trips, half of the group does programming with GROW, and then this is how the partnership kind of works with TC. The other half then goes on a tour of the campus, really focusing on the agribusiness program and the sustainability efforts on campus and within their dining service. And then they swap and come to us. I also want to highlight field trips at Deep Roots Community Farm. During the spring of 2024, we hosted 215 students out at the farm. And as you can see, there are lots of smiles that happen on the farm. So as we're winding down with summer programming, I wanted to go ahead and highlight opportunities that grow in collaboration with School District of La Crosse Summer School Programming, was able to provide during the time when gardens are most bountiful during the summer. So I was fortunate to actually teach 3 of those garden-based enrichment classes called Cooking Fun in the School Garden. Each was held at a different school garden, each one filled to capacity. There were 48 students that registered for the classes. We had a blast learning in the garden and creating something new each day, using produce harvested from the garden, and made things like salsa, smoothies, rainbow roll-ups, and strawberry chocolate mint desserts with homemade whipped cream. We dissected flowers to study parts of plants and how pollination works. One week, I received an email from a parent of a 4th grader who was in my class. She stated, "My child ate 2 pieces of lettuce in his sandwich today. That was a first. Seems the class already helped get him to try something green." We get so many of those comments from teachers and parents along the way. In previous years, we have also offered science in the garden, art in the garden, and a class on sustainability. Also, for several years now, we've been collaborating to make farm camp at Deep Roots Community Farm free for students. This summer, 92 students were able to attend farm camp for free at Deep Roots Community Farm through the School District of La Crosse summer offerings. Every summer, these farm camps fill up within seconds of the online registration going live. I think it was about 30 seconds this year. Many students return year after year, or hope to return year after year. Although the summer school funding does cover a large part of the cost, each year GROW does seek grant funding to help offset the costs of holding these camps at the farm. Another thing that we try to do in the gardens for the last few summers, we have engaged youth and families during weekly open garden programming, which rotates each week to different gardens to be able to show the unique offerings of each garden and to ensure that children are benefiting from the garden during the summer months and produce is being distributed to families. Every summer, staff, interns, and volunteers harvest produce, and if it is not being used for programming, it goes to the district free lunch program. This summer, approximately, although they did harvest today, 450 pounds of produce have been harvested and given to the community through the school lunch programs and at handouts. In fact, just a little bit ago, an intern was handing out some produce at Hamilton BGC to those families because the school lunch program is done for the summer. So, planning for the future. We are incredibly proud of the reach that we are able to have within this community and feel the support from teachers, families, students, administrators, donors, and business sponsors. With that said, GROW programming is almost entirely funded by fundraising, grant writing, establishing business sponsors. Each school, parent-teacher organization, and administrators have found funding each year to support the program, which sometimes is a stretch. We are currently strategic planning as an organization. Our goals are to increase equity by partnering with all elementary schools and to work with the district on ways that we can be supported by the district and possibly in some financial ways, just in order to make it sustainable. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Laura, for the invite. And I look forward to if there are any questions, or you can always contact me. But really appreciate the time to highlight. So,
Go ahead.
yeah. Oh,
Go ahead. I was going to call Mr. Bagneski, but go ahead.
How does a class get from the classroom into the gardens themselves?
yes. So teachers, so the garden educators who work in the gardens with students, they send out a sign-up The teachers sign up for times during that particular week that work. Then the teachers come out to the gardens with their students. And so it is that the teachers are asked to be there, and it also allows a time for us to even kind of show teachers how you can teach outdoors. You know, it's kind of a model too. But yes, so their teachers or other staff are coming out with them.
Mr. Pegneski?
I have a number of questions.
Oh.
Do you have any connection with Victory Gardens?
We know of them, but we do not presently do any kind of programming or maintenance with them.
I mean, that might be a good connection as far as students, whether it's growing over here or
Right.
at City Hall or whatever.
Sure, neighborhood kinds of
Yep.
kids.
And then I was a little disappointed to hear that at Hamilton, Soda has the garden, but Hamilton students don't, and they may, I thought that's what you had indicated.
No.
That,
I'm sorry, no, I hope that didn't come off that way. So Hamilton and Soda
okay,
all have access to garden programming, so, yeah.
I know when I was there, we had a garden behind Gunderson Lutheran.
That's right, yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. Okay, and then, have you ever thought about, or, I don't know, it's not a farm, but going to the fair in West Salem, County Fair, or whatever, taking a busload of students? It's not really a farm setting, but you'd see a number of different garden products and a number of different animals.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing because this area really is rich with all those kinds of opportunities, and I think just it comes down to what our capacity is, and that would take some funding to
Yeah.
bring kids on a bus, but I think, yeah, lots of opportunities for sure.
Yep.
So I appreciate that.
Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Northside Elementary being in session during that period of time does go to the county fair, and so that
Oh,
has
they
been
do?
a,
Okay.
a great opportunity the last few years.
So the summer,
Great.
Just wondering about the lot adjacent to the Hamilton School. Did you acquire that property, or did the school district do that?
Well, so several years ago, we approached another organization under Gerard Heschler Realtors. Shelter Development is who helped us obtain that space through a grant that they wrote for. And so at the time, there was an agreement with the district that it would be rented for $1 a year. So we have occupied that space. We put in a water line through with a grant that we got, and we also, have really developed that, and the hope kind of that, it also kind of serve the community as well. Yes, but that is a place of discussion. Shelter Development is coming back to us and saying, kind of what's next. So that probably is a larger kind of conversation that the district also needs to be a part of. So.
one more. If we had something from a Victory Garden, where would, and you said donate it to the school district of La Crosse, do you take it to a school, or do we bring it here, or?
Typically, what we have worked out with the nutrition department at the schools is that mostly during the summer, we're bringing it to those locations that are preparing and handing out free school lunch programs. Spence has kind of been oftentimes a hub for us because they're oftentimes in the past have sent out the lunches from there. But yes, it goes directly to the schools.
Okay.
Have you ever had a disgruntled kid with a bag with just one giant zucchini in it?
Have I ever had a disgruntled kid? No, because it's a big zucchini, right?
And lots of them.
Yes, and lots of them. Good.
Other questions?
I just have a comment. I just want to share gratitude for the programming, and my kids were beneficiaries of the incredible programming that Grow does both at Soda and through farm camps. And it's a lot of work raising the money to support these programs, and it's an incredible value to the school district and our kids in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would echo those sentiments and say that every time I've been out in the garden, it's been super fun and engaging. students that may be less well behaved in the confines of a classroom often do better
Yeah.
out there, or vice versa.
Right.
And the engaging connection to our standards is just a great way to make our education come to life. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So,
I guess the only question I would have for you is, could you give us a snapshot of things that you would like to see grow do in the future compared to where you are now?
well, I think, like I said, I think just from an equity point, I think we would like to see at all the elementary schools the opportunity, like the garden may look a little different at each place. A couple of the other schools actually have school gardens, but again, it's the sustainability piece where we're there to kind of sustain the program no matter what, even if a teacher who's interested in it retires or goes away, that we're always there. So I think, that is key for us to have that equity in that way. So that is something we hope to see. And then our continued kind of connection just with those field trips in terms of, at this beautiful space that we now have at TC's campus. So I think just looking at ways that, we can take a little bit of the burden off of PTOs in terms of, they really are committed each year. They could then say, oh, we're not going to have the contract, this coming year. We just can't do it. But they love it so much that they're willing to kind of make it happen, or administrators are willing to make it happen. So I think just, again, that sustainability piece would be great. So.
Any other questions from the board members? Hearing none, thank you so much for your time
Thank
and your
you.
presentation.
I appreciate it.
Okay. So we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the referendum update and outreach. And so I'm sure my colleagues on the board have been getting the same question I have, which is, when will we start seeing some information sessions rolling out? People are very interested in starting to engage in those sessions, especially since we're about 3 months out.
Laura sent them out a few days ago, so everybody has all of the dates now.
Correct. So just to verify that people do have them.
Those are proposed dates for the referendum information sessions. That's what our intent is, but if the board has any feedback, certainly open. Tried to find a range of dates, times that made sense for those buildings scattered across the school district.
So any feedback from the board members, given that information was sent out?
The only feedback I have is all of them except one was from 6 to 7. So it might be helpful to throw in a couple more even virtual options over the noon hour.
Over the lunch hour. We did have really good attendance
We
at the
did.
one
Yes.
noon
Yeah.
hour virtual one, so.
We can add a few more of those.
Okay.
And I think virtual would probably be the easiest, given trying to fit them in. So, yeah, that would be great. I think, and I was gonna say the same thing. We have a lot in the evening, but I think we need to have some more opportunities for people. It would be great if we could think of some morning times as well, for those who may be third shift. And trying to scatter them across the day, but definitely the noon hour would be important. That was the thing I wanted to ensure we brought forward, so that the community knows that we did get those dates, that they are out there. Yes, Dr. Sprague?
So, Dr. Engel, since these are proposed, I imagine some of them are contingent on the fact that we need to be able to have board members present.
I think if we pick those dates, we'll assume that at least a board member would be present at each, but we would move forward regardless. We know that conflicts and things come up, and we'll ensure that, that there are people there to present that information. Our goal is to work with administrators and teachers in the district as well, to get a wide range of folks there to support that. The message is always better from the people that folks are closest to, and so our goal is to try and create that opportunity.
Okay. It sounds like we're feeling comfortable with the dates then, at this point. Other things that we need to bring up or discuss under the referendum update and outreach?
I believe Nick will be putting out social media messages to let people know that there's yard signs and other things available to pick up if people want to put those in their yard, but are ready to go. Gonna happen.
A question that I got that, I kind of referenced at the last meeting, but maybe Dr. Engel or Ms. Sprain can kind of, for the public's knowledge, better explain, why is the district not putting out documents that say, vote yes?
That is
I know why we can't, but I need you guys to explain it to the public.
great question. So schools occupy a unique place in terms of political issues in that we have to be everything to everyone. And so we can't take a political position on any election. And that certainly makes sense as it relates to like the presidential election. We wouldn't want teachers, school officials taking positions on whether to vote for this presidential candidate or another one. That would be an inappropriate use of our position as a school district. But then by chance, it extends to the political issues that we put forward on the ballot as well, like a referendum. And so while we most typically put forward items that we think will be beneficial for the school district, we can't tell people to vote yes or no on a given issue. And so all we can do is present the information to the best of our ability, answer people's questions, and ensure that people get out and vote and exercise their constitutional right.
Yeah. So we cannot say vote for or against, but we can say please vote.
Exactly, and that's what you'll see with the signs, with the door hangers that people see, bookmarks, flyers. It all says, here's some good information. Please get out and vote November 5th and exercise your judgment without our undue influence. So, good question.
I've heard it from a few people, and I've explained it to them, but I think the public just needed to hear it officially. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Ms. Burkett,
How do you always know before I know that I'm gonna say something?
you have a look.
Can you fill the board in on what our role is anticipated to be at the info sessions?
Yeah, so how we've had a couple of years of info sessions for referenda, and we've experienced, the different ways that people want to engage in those info sessions. And so our goal is to present some brief information to the community, just kind of giving an overview of that information. So why is this on the ballot? What will it entail? How much it will cost, et cetera. And then really giving people time for one-on-one opportunities with a variety of people to get their specific questions answered. And so wherever possible, we'll have a range of administrators there who can answer, what's the impact on instruction? What's the impact on finances? Having board members there to talk about what it means to them from a community standpoint and how we got here. Having teachers there to talk about what it means from a teacher's perspective in terms of what this referendum will do. And so short presentation, just to kind of get some basic information out there for folks, and then an opportunity for one-on-one Q&A in small groups with people.
And the short presentation will likely be administration from the schools hosting the info session?
That's correct.
Okay.
We'll just be presenting, the information. Usually we'll have, a school board member, if there's somebody there, just kind of introduce it. It is the board's referendum, just to welcome people, say hi, but then our job as administrators is to present the information and get that out there, and then all of us can collaborate to answer the questions of folks. And then in particular, if we're on site at a building that's had recent additions or is a new building like Northside, we'll have an opportunity for tours as well, so folks can see what what you would do in the last 10 years if you had a chance to make some additions or build a brand new building. So hopefully people can get a sense for what these new spaces could be.
In thinking about our role as board members, and of course we are different from but attached to the school district, right? If I feel strongly and positively, as I do, about one or more parts of the plan and answering questions and explaining why I think something is a good idea, does that not cross into advocacy? And am I under the same constraints?
Well, I think there's a slight but important difference between saying vote yes on this issue and saying I think this will be really good for kids and this is why. Two different things.
But we still can't say, so please vote for it.
And so please get out and vote. Can't say vote yes,
Got
can't
it.
say vote no. You might highlight things that you think will be challenges that we still have to work through, right? But you wouldn't say vote no, So that caveat is the vote yes or vote no. Everything up to that point is generally acceptable. And so encouraging people to vote, talking through the pros and cons, how we got here, no idea is perfect, and so there's certainly things to consider. But I know the board wouldn't have put this on the ballot if they didn't think it was good for kids.
And being clear that you're sharing as yourself
Personal.
and not representing the school
School
board
board.
with your statements, right?
Yeah, and then when you're not in a school board capacity, you are more than welcome to say vote yes or vote no. So if you're at a info session as a school board member, you would be limited, because you're in a role as a school board member, you're an official now, right? You're like, this is why this could be good for kids, these are my thoughts. But as soon as you're a citizen, not acting on behalf of the board, you can say vote yes, vote no. And you can tell people, I intend to vote yes, and I think you should as well, if that's your position as a citizen. And because school board members are in kind of that weird limbo area, it's good to make that caveat if it isn't clear already. I just want to let you know I'm speaking as a citizen now, not as a school board member. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, but my opinion is X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I mean, we still have the policy that none of us individually can speak on behalf of the board except for the president.
Mr. Minka, did you have a question?
I did not actually.
Can we make a Facebook post that says, my personal opinion is this is a good thing, vote yes?
Absolutely. Anytime you can put in that caveat of, I'm speaking as a private citizen in this moment, not as a school board member, I think X, Y, or Z. That is always good to do just to kind of cover your bases to make sure it's clear.
Yeah,
And if you have campaign, Facebook pages, better not to use those for those sorts of affirmative
Okay.
statements as opposed to a private one, if you can make that distinction. Sometimes people have both of those things depending on their political strategies.
Please, 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 just a reminder to everybody to be careful about stating that on any type of Facebook post, because there are some challenges that could happen for you personally if you do not specify that you're speaking as an individual, not as a school board member, and you try to stifle any type of conversation from others who may disagree with your point of view. So you really want to be careful about that. Not saying you can't, just be careful.
Okay.
Dr. Jimenez, if you feel comfortable, you were on the radio the other day.
Oh, Lord. Yes, I was. Yeah, anything
How
in
did that
particular?
conversation go? I mean, you had an
Yeah.
opportunity to talk to Rick Solomon, Wisdom, and
Yeah, it's always an interesting time to be on WIZM because it becomes kind of a conversation and we forget about what it was that we had as our bullet points. But it was great. I mean, we had a great conversation. We talked about making sure, just like we did at the last board meeting, about Plan B and what is that, what does that mean? So I wanted to ensure we talked about that. We had some conversations about other things that are going on within the school district. I know a question that Rick brought up was about cell phone bans, just in social media bans, and what does that mean? What does that look like? So we had quite the conversation, but I mean, it was a great conversation. I appreciate Rick's, so what I'm looking for, curiosity when it comes to the school district, and he has some very, very good, thoughtful questions. Yes, sir.
What were some of the questions he had about the referendum, more of an outsider perspective of the referendum?
Yeah, I mean, for him, it was, just asking what was just, a reminder of what is the value that we have on there. So, $53.5 million. And, the question of, came up again about why people may think that there is a division among the board, that some people may not want the referendum, and just reiterating that when there were no votes on the referendum when it was passed, it really was not about the referendum, but just how the question was worded, right? Whether it should be two questions or one question. But that, the entire board has stated pretty clearly that we're all behind the referendum as a whole. So questions like that, just a reminder of what are the pieces that are encompassed in the referendum question. So, the Emerson-Spence combination at the Hogan site, the Hogan administration moving to Central, Hinchin moving to State Road. So just kind of reiterating those points again so that people can get one more shot at hearing all the details. a lot of questions that, you know, I tried to make sure we pointed people to the referendum website, that there is a lot of FAQs sitting out there and that they would be very beneficial for people to start there in terms of their research and then reaching out for other questions they may have. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of the website, I have a favor to ask of everybody. If you could take some time in the next couple weeks and comb through the referendum website, read through the FAQs, and if any of them are too concise, need a little more detail or information, please email Aaron, Dr. Engel, and let him know, because he's communicating with Meter what changes we need to the website, because by the time the end of the month hits, we're gonna see a significant uptick in traffic to the website with the info sessions occurring. So
Absolutely.
we wanna make sure that through our lens and our connections to the community, that we think that it's ready to go. And I think it's in a really good spot right now, but you may think that, oh, this FAQ could use a little more detail or whatever.
Absolutely. And our goal was to keep answers to about 2 to 3 sentences, you know, super specific. But we also know that some of these are really complicated, providing the right length and the right terminology too. I get caught up in edu-speak like every educator does, and so if it doesn't resonate with folks or meet people where they're at, you know, that's good feedback too.
Other questions, comments? Okay. I do feel we're in a really good place in terms of referendum information and getting to where we need to be. Again, encourage all of you to try to make as many of the sessions as you possibly can. You know, we, like Dr. Engel said, we all have situations that happen and conflicts that happen, but I think the more we are engaged with the community, the better that will look in terms of our backing of the referendum. So if there's no other questions or comments or conversation on the referendum update and outreach, then we'll move on.
May I sneak in?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to consider Oktoberfest parades at all?
Like marching in them?
As a district or as a school board?
Can certainly
I
rally
think
people.
it'd be good publicity.
Why is everyone looking at me?
Torchlight especially.
I marched that parade twice for many years with different outfits.
What's different? Did you wear that shirt under your lederhosen?
No, Central Marching Band and the Warriors Baton and Drum Corps for years, and then the Crosse District Pipes and Drums. So
Wow.
a lot of marching.
I guess I don't have a feeling one way or the other. I know I would not be available because I will be out of town on Oktoberfest weekend.
I don't think
So-
people like us enough to feel like it would be fun. Just being real.
We appreciate your honesty.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
it's a good idea.
Yeah,
There's also a fee associated with it, so that's why
Right.
I brought it up. That would be,
Would be an
something
opportunity to
desired.
distribute material to folks, you know, here's a pencil and a flyer, you know, I don't know if people are open to that at that time, you know, a large billboard that says, you know, vote November 5th, you know, people have plenty of reminders during these parades to vote November 5th, that won't be an issue.
It's true.
right.
Be surprised if people would wanna take them though.
Hold on school referendum.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
can't commit at the
Right, and that, I think that's the bigger issue is
Yeah.
commitment of the board in order to be able to attend that, so.
I'd be willing to walk.
Okay.
I mean, it's good for handing out pamphlets. You can hand out pamphlets like the FAQ portions to people and
Mhm.
doing the event. Very good outreach, but like I said, it's just can we commit to it?
Yeah.
And I don't think it just has to be members of the board. It could be other members of the community walking with us as well too, if that's something to go
Probably.
through.
The teachers union.
When do we need to submit our,
I believe for early bird pricing, it was August 31st.
okay, so before our next board meeting?
What's the pricing?
Yeah.
Well, let me pull it up again. I had it open on a tab, and of course it's gone now.
I know, we're asking all these tough questions.
And we can certainly send out a poll to
Mhm.
folks later after we have some time to digest it. This is
Yeah.
new information, right? And trying to think about availability and
Yeah, I think if we've got all
how
the
that
information,
resonates with the community.
then we can decide. Okay, yeah, if you would just send that out, and then, you know, we could respond directly to Laura.
The Torchlight would probably have more local people than the parade
Mm-hmm,
itself on Oktoberfest. Too many outsiders,
right.
we don't like those. You know, light it up.
All right, well, we'll wait for Ms. Steigerwald to send us that email, and then we can digest that information as a board. Okay. Thank you for that, Ms. Steigerwald. Appreciate it. Then we'll move on to the approval of the superintendent's consent agenda. And so the consent agenda is a mechanism that's used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. And are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? Not hearing any. So is there a motion and a second to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
Superintendent's consented.
Yeah,
Oh, that's the wrong one.
yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the super board consent agenda. as presented.
The super board?
I'm
Hey.
paraphrasing, okay.
Yeah, we're
One more
good.
time.
Okay.
Seconded.
We know what you mean. So, moved by Mr. Mankus, seconded by Dr. Sprague to approve the items on the superintendent's
water now.
consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion has carried, and we'll move on to the board consent agenda.
I'm gonna let you guys have this one.
I'll make a motion to approve the board's agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
Seconded.
All right, moved by Mr. Bagneski, seconded by Dr. Sprague to approve the items on the board consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion has carried, oh,
I don't know, if we could go back to the superintendent's
Yes.
agenda. I would just, is that about the same number, approximately the same number of people hired and retired or leaving the district? I mean, do you have any idea in mind, hey, listen, we had hired 52 people this year versus 31 last year or something?
Yeah, less than the last couple of years. So we've seen a decline in turnover this year as opposed to last few years. And then in terms of hiring, we still have some vacant positions, which isn't, you know, unheard of at this time of year, but many less than in previous years. So our hiring rate and readiness for the school year is better than it has been. So definitely seeing an improving environment in terms of turnover and hiring.
my apologies, Mr. Bagneski. All right, so then let's move on to the matters reserved for board action, and we'll talk about OE9, communicating with the public and key stakeholders. And I believe with this one, this is us voting to whether we are in compliance with exceptions or not in compliance. So is there a motion for this one?
Can I make a comment first real quick? All right, so this is more so for the public, since again, I've got a couple questions about these before. This is really just our way of measuring if we are, if we're speaking out to the public, make sure that our information is heard by the public as well. So this is really just a way just to keep us ourselves accountable, making sure that you are able to hear from us about what's going on in our district as well.
Is there a motion?
In regard to the monitoring report for policy OE9, communicating with the public and key stakeholders, and with respect to the provisions of policy BSR5, superintendent accountability, the Board of Education concludes that the superintendent and district are in compliance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay. Remember, we did have a discussion at the last board meeting, so this is just our action on this, but just in case, Dr. Sprague.
Just as a reminder that this version of it is the old version that still contains the interpretation language, which we've now decided to remove for the going forward.
Right,
Absolutely.
so I believe under information, we will be re-looking at this to remove those items.
Correct. And
Yes.
then removing that will be at our following meeting.
Yes, the
an
next,
item for
the
action.
next removal.
Got
So,
it.
okay. So a motion by Ms. Birkendahl and seconded by Dr. Sprague that in regard to the monitoring report for policy OE9, communicating with the public and key stakeholders and with respect to the provisions of policy BSR5, superintendent accountability. The Board of Education concludes that the superintendent and district are in compliance. Just one more time, any questions or comments before we move to vote? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion has carried, and we'll move on to the 2023-2024 fund balance designations, and I will turn it over to Dr. Engel or Ms. Sprang for the presentation.
Yeah, I'll give a quick preamble and I'll turn it over to our subject matter expert, Ms. Sprang, on this topic. It was kind of a weird year. So I'd just like to preface it with that, in that we were seeing the spending down of some significant grants. And when you're spending down significant grants like ESSER and Project Aware, what often happens is you're finding ways to spend that money so that you can maximize the impact and return for the school district. And so we have found that there's a lot of cases where we were able to move budget items into grant funding as we expended those grants, and that came out of our general funding, impacting our fund balance as a result. So it was savvy use of our grant funding by our business office, which I'm incredibly thankful for. There were also some other weird expenses that were reduced and some revenues that increased. We had more interest from investments because of the interest rate environment right now, which is a good thing. So we had more revenue than anticipated. We also had some positions that were vacated for periods of time, including administrators, and sadly we lost one of our administrators mid-year this year unexpectedly, and so there's some salaries that were substantially reduced as a result also. And so a number of weird things, and happy to get into the details and weeds, but I'll let Ms. Sprang walk through the fund balance designations.
Okay, so this is an annual report to the board. Remember that this is a fund balance designation as of June 30th, the end of our fiscal year. It does not mean money in the bank. At the end of our fiscal year, we have about $16 million in receivables, $11 million from our municipalities for taxes that they don't pay us until August. But we report all of that into the last fiscal year as a receivable. So this is the fund balance, not only for the general fund, but also our other funds that are designated for certain purposes that really are restricted or committed by the nature of those funds. So the first part we have, and let me just preface that also, that by our policy that we need to have an unassigned fund balance not lower than 15 to 20% of our expenditures of the prior year. So this is the process we go through to make sure that we are in compliance with that. So the restricted fund balance, they are the fund balance classification. They're reported because there's constraints on those funds. And so we have our self-funded dental insurance fund, our HRA for custodians that we used to put up in the prepaids. As you can see in the prior 2 years that amount was much larger than it is this year. The auditors last year asked that we put that in restricted. That's where that belongs. So that's the movement from prepaid amounts to the restricted. We have our common school fund. We are required by the state to reserve those funds that were not used in this fiscal year to use in a future year. We had $657,000 of grant dollars that were given to us, but it was not a reimbursable grant. So that we have the dollars, we're going to be spending them in the next year. Then the capital projects, Fund 4147. That reflects the referendum dollars that we use this time around to do projects, but those projects are being done this summer. So the expense of them won't be recognized until the next few months when we start receiving the invoices. Then, of course, the debt service fund. Inside that debt service fund is about $4 million of rebates from our qualified school construction bonds and our Build America bonds. We'll use those dollars to pay off debt in the coming years. Then we have our committed fund.
Just to clarify, that debt service is for previous capital referendum? Is that correct? Or is it
Yes,
Okay.
Absolutely. Fund 39. Then, of course, there were scholarships, and then Fund 50's fund balance is restricted for school nutrition. So that makes up our restricted fund balance. Then
Why
the
is the school nutrition one so high? Is that, so that's grant funds we receive but we'll spend in a subsequent year, or?
The grant, it could be partially grant money. It can also be part of parents' funds that,
Oh.
you know, they contributed to their school accounts that their students will use in coming years. The fund balance in Fund 50 needs to be no higher than 3 months of expenditures for school nutrition. Ours is below that amount, so we are okay there. Then, as far as back to the committed, we have the technology lease that we commit dollars to so that we make sure that we keep our one-to-one projects going. And then our capital expenditures, actually, I looked into this a little bit more after I talked to you, Dr. Engel, and that has been increased because of cybersecurity. So it's, that's something that's changed in the past few years. Capital expense, building renovation, that is for our existing buildings. We have old existing buildings, so we put money aside for that. The operating referendum funds previously funded by ESSER, this $4.3 million is what we have as far as the increase to the referendum, the operating referendum this last year, that we didn't need to use in this last year. As Dr. Engel had said, we moved a lot of expenditures that we thought we would have out of our general fund to those grants so that we could use those dollars up. So we have that kind of reserved for the next few years when our budgets are going to be pretty tight. So,
Can I ask a question, sir? On the capital capital building renovation, so it's a committed fund balance, so who's the party that commits that or restricts that or determines that balance?
the board is committing to that as they have in the past. I look back also, depending on what our fund balance is at the end of any given year, those dollar amounts will change because years ago, we used to put a lot more money as a reserve. So when I talk about fund balance and I talk about cash reserves, remember, we're actually in a deficit of $16 million at the end of the school year. Those are monies that we should have to pay for expenditures, and that's what we use fund balance for, to cover us.
And the
for
use of
cash
those
flow.
funds would take board action.
Yes, right. So right now, this is, when the board approves this, you're committing to this for 1 year until the next year. And if you would change it during the year, or we'd have a need to increase it or decrease this, that would have to be a board action.
So, I'm not recommending it, I'm just asking for understanding how this process works. So, the prior year was 1.6 million, and now it's 2 million. Could we, as a board tonight, say we'd prefer that to be 1.6 million? Do we have that authority to do that tonight? I'm not recommending that, I just want to understand the process.
You could. And it all goes back to the cost of our old buildings to kind of like be secure, that we could, if we have something happen, we have funds to take care of it if it's a major expense.
So if I'm understanding right, the 2 million represented here should map on to the report that Mr. Lavina gives us on their capital improvement plan.
It would be more emergencies in this case. It's in case something happens. It doesn't take much to get to $2 million
Right, these are not
in
the
renovation
actual committed
expenses.
projects.
We've
This
had
is-
a wall fall down before, and that's
Fire
not
at Central.
a fire at Central.
flood
Exactly.
at
We had a
Central.
flood at Longfellow.
Or
That was $1 million right there. There are, and then we will need to be responsible for those expenses until insurance comes through, if that's an option, or in some cases, it's not even going to be an option. Or it could be something that comes up that becomes a sudden need mandated by the state or something else. There could be a new ADA provision or something where we have to rapidly respond. And so these funds are set aside by the board to ensure that we are secure in the future based on our reasonable anticipation of what could happen.
And I would assume that with older buildings, we probably want to set aside a little bit more. If we had newer buildings, we might set aside a little bit less, because there would be less of a need potentially for an emergency situation versus the situation we're in.
If there was a flood in a gymnasium, it might be $500,000 just to replace a floor so that we could continue to operate WIA sports and create that sense of belonging for our students. Simple things like that can be really expensive.
So I think I saw two hands. Ms. Bergedahl?
I just want to check my understanding. So we have a variety of funds with different designated purposes, of which we allocate a specific amount of funding for the school year. This is the money left over that wasn't spent, that we essentially allocated to be spent in the previous school year, which is different from what we budgeted to spend overall for like maintenance and stuff like that, correct?
More or less, yes. It's a weird, so if we stopped being a school district today, this is what would be left over. But because it's an ongoing continual process, it's just ins and outs, ins and outs, ins and outs. And so this represents the money that's not committed in our regular budget. It's the kind of extra you could think of, but allows us to operate our school district on a regular basis. We're creating designations for this, the board is, so that it's not just sitting there for a rainy day, it's for very specific purpose if the need should arise. And so it can't be spent on something else that, you know, the board is committing to a particular designation right now.
So in other words, many of those funds, if not all of them, could simply be put in unassigned fund balance. But for transparency and good planning and stewardship, it's prudent to break them out and
Absolutely.
specify.
Trying to be thoughtful about the future and proactive.
So, we need, I mean, it's appropriate to set aside money for emergencies. We do that in our own personal budgets. So, when and how do we get reports of how, so like of the money that was set aside in these previous years, again, there was things that happened in our buildings previous years. So we use some of that money, so we're using unspent funds to replenish it, but how do we get the report on what was used and how it was used? Just so we haven't, again, for transparency, so we can explain this to the public, that they don't think we're just chucking away money to hide it, because we're not.
I think what we really try to do is look at what kind of expenses did we have in the past? What kind of unexpected things? And then we talk about the age of our buildings. So if we had all newer buildings, we would certainly not have to put away or, that amount of money. But, because of the age of our buildings and the cost of repair, and remember, this is just for this coming year.
Yeah, my question is, other years we've used some of that balance, and then we've had to replenish it as appropriate. That's, you have an emergency, you spend money, and then you've got to replenish it, because you got to have it available for the next year. So that's an appropriate way to do
Absolutely.
business. When do we, as a board, or how do we get a report on what was used that needed to get replenished? That's my question.
For some of these, it's very specific, like common school funds, that's funds for books for libraries. Our librarians spend out those funds, anything that's left over ends up here. For something like capital expenditures last year, I don't believe we used that at all. It was there in case we didn't have anything where we needed to touch that. If that line item got touched, it would come back to the board. It's like, hey, the board designated this thing as a committed fund balance. We're requesting that the board authorize its use. Then if you look down to assigned fund balance, there's something like technology switch project. That's a very specific thing we're authorizing the IT department to move forward on. They would execute that project and you would see it in the future as a zero likely, or a small fund balance remaining.
So when we present the budget to you, and if our expenditures exceed the revenues, you're gonna be using some fund balance for something, right? So if we would have come to you at the end of the year or in the middle of the year, mostly in the middle of the year, because it'd be an emergency, it would be, board, we have to use that 2 million or 1.6 million that we set aside for this purpose.
Okay.
And so that's the board allowing us to go into fund balance to use it for that purpose that we committed to.
So the public understands how those funds are used and why and how they're set aside. That
Yes.
was my purpose of my
Absolutely.
question.
And that's why they fluctuate from year to year too. Let's see. And then we have, more of the assigned fund balances. And as Dr. Engel said, those are very specific changes. That Act 20 is the change in our reading curriculum. And then, of course, class size needs, that has been that way. And that is, so let's say we had an influx of many students unexpected, and we had to add a teacher or 3, or, that would be something that we had maybe not budgeted for, but it would be an expense that we would have.
We were curious with the Afghan refugees if we would end up educating some of those students, and we did not end up needing to, but it would have been an opportunity to have some funds available to flexibly respond to that.
Yes.
And Ms. Sprang, just also to be clear, we are so far in this presentation going from the most restricted funds all the way down to the least restricted funds, correct? Okay.
The unassigned fund balances, this is where we go into the total of the unassigned fund balances has to be at least 15 to 20% of our prior year expenditures. And what it ends up to be this year actually is 23% of our last year's expenditures. Last year it was 22%, so we're still within compliance. And last year, this first part is for those reimbursable grants, like I said, is part of that 16 million that we're waiting for is grant reimbursement. So that's what we use for cash flow. The 20 million is mostly to meet our payroll needs in October, November, December, January. As you've seen now, on our monthly reports, how that fund balance can get down to 10%, 11%, and that's okay at that time of year, but that's how we avoid short-term borrowing.
And that's because our fiscal year starts July 1st and we start payroll July 1st, but we don't see tax revenues until January. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you also explain to us the difference between restricted, committed, and assigned, just so we better understand why they're different groupings? They aren't all just called the same thing?
Right. The restricted are, actually, the board has no control over the restricted. That is restricted by the nature of the fund or the
fund
purpose.
source, right? Who gives us the money?
Right.
Okay.
Committed is for the things that the board feels that we should have something set aside for the next year for those purposes. And then assigned fund balance is more, some of them are restricted, but they're for specific purposes, the projects mostly that are going to happen in the future. So I guess the assigned future student technology one-to-one. So this district has made a commitment to one-to-one technology, and we feel that we don't always want to rely on, in the future, having to go out for operating referendums. We want to be able to afford to pay those lease payments on an annual basis without going into more debt. So is that helpful? And then the unassigned is just, those could be fluctuating amounts, but they do have a purpose. So, and I'm gonna say it one more time, this is not cash on hand. So this is just money that we designate, so like the unassigned fund balance is for contingency. We increased that because of the Title IX, the changes in Title IX that could or could not cause some type of litigation or an additional expense to the district to be in compliance. The emergencies, that is where we have the exact amount that we have set aside for things like the flood at Longfellow, which cost us close to $1 million, as we said, but we have not yet seen any insurance money from that. So we had to pay for those things so that we can keep school going, and that just enables us to do that without having to get a loan or delay those projects and maybe impact our student learning. And then the rest is left over for unassigned. So it really just is the amount that's left over. We don't have any specific designation. So I did break it down for you. So this is, remember, this is all fund balances, restricted, general fund, food service, community service fund. The community service fund, of course, is the dollars that were left over that we had levied in previous years for a certain purpose that we will not have to levy for that purpose in the coming year. So, but anything you've levied for in Fund 80, you have to use for that same purpose year after year if there's leftover money.
Just a couple, or one more question. So these numbers will also appear in the audit report that comes to us in December or January, correct?
Yes.
Um,
And you'll see it again in OE5 and OE6, the financial operational
The
expectation.
only other comment I would make is, next year, prior to us reviewing this report, I think it would be a nice workshop. I think this is a good,
Sure.
I think a lot of people have a lot of conversations, but I think it'd be a good workshop topic.
Yeah, this is like the final step of our audit from 2003, 2004. So once the board approves these, we update our general ledger and we send it to the auditors so that they have the numbers to use that the board approved. So, any other questions?
Not hearing any other questions from the board.
Thank you for answering all my questions.
So if there's no other questions, then we'll accept a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion to accept the final 2023-2024 committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance designations as presented.
Okay, moved by Dr. Sprague, seconded by Mr. Manka to accept the final 2023-2024 committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance designations as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion has carried, and we will move on to the 2024-2025 Community Service Fund Levy, which is Fund 80. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel and Ms. Spring, or Mr. Teff.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. So we wanted to update a few of these proposals based on feedback from the board to make sure that we're trying to address your questions and interest in this area. Specifically, projected benefits, projected costs of the status quo is what, some folks are curious about. What happens if we don't do this? And then to answer some of those additional questions for folks. And so Mr. Teff will kind of walk through some stuff. We'll take all the questions that folks have and have an opportunity to discuss how to proceed.
All right, we're going to try to get this up. Let's see anymore. It was, and then, oh, there's that. And the slide deck is also in the agenda if you had a chance to review that, so we can't get this set up, we'll just talk through it.
It's always user error. I know that.
For sure.
Every time I ask IT, so did you do this? No.
Did you turn it on?
Did you turn it on? Did you update it? Did you turn it off? Is it plugged in?
My kids just
Shut
say
it off and
skill
start
issues.
again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Give it one more chance and we can start.
Opportunity for more popcorn if anyone's interested.
Made by Ms. Steigerwald
It's
herself.
gonna change fund balance.
Okay.
Oh.
Hey, got one.
There we go.
There's two.
Okay, we can use that one too. Okay, thanks. Well, it looks like I'm connected now.
Isn't that a song I don't like Mondays?
Mm.
Boomtown Rats.
I want to go to wherever that picture is.
Mm-hmm.
Austria.
Austria?
Just kidding.
Okay. I'll believe you. You sounded very convincing.
That's from.
It shows me connected. And there is a video embedded in the presentation, so that's what we really need this for, unless everybody had a chance to see it. Okay. Won't have sound. Won't have sound? Okay. All right, that's all right. Okay, thanks for having me back again. Yeah, really wanted to spend some more time going back through the strategies. So, you know, you had a chance to preview the slide deck organized by strategies. We're bringing back some background, some other information that we think will be helpful as this is an action item tonight. So we'll start with Proposal 1, which was around an early childhood strategy. The bones of it would be $100,000 to hire an early childhood impact coordinator to lead work to really improve outcomes for youth in our community. Did everyone get a chance to look at this video at all? I wonder if can I play it and we'll come over this mic?
I think, hey, folks
that?
want to watch it, I think we
Yeah.
can skip it, but.
Skip it for tonight? Okay. Anyway, this, if you haven't had a chance to watch the video, this is right from the Center on the Developing Child out of Harvard. One of the founding directors of that center, but really outlines and helps create the context for why this work's so important and really what's possible within it as we think about that critical time period for youth. Wanted to share with you a working theory of change. It's called a working theory of change because all this work is done in the context of community. You know, we haven't brought single partner together. You know, there's a lot of partners that are talking about this. This is on the minds of a lot of folks in our community, thinking about how do we support young children and families really to improve outcomes. And so we do have a working theory of change, which is really anchored around this idea of if we can partner with other agencies and work to support the whole child, the whole family, to be strategic in how we support youth and families, we think, because it's been done in other places, we have a good chance to improve outcomes for youth. Helping students become more school ready, make sure they stay on track developmentally, make sure that we have strong partnerships with families, not only to just impact school outcomes, but really I think this work has a chance to have an overall impact on our community. And really supports our vision as a school district to support the whole child and to make sure that we're graduating students who are ready for what's next, that they're not in the criminal justice system, they leave with a diploma, they're mentally healthy, they're well-adjusted, and they can contribute to their community at large. One of the questions that you might be thinking about is why us? Why now? Why are we even getting involved in this work? And one of the realities is we're seeing the gaps that currently exist show up, and not just our community, but other communities too are seeing, coming out of the pandemic, record early childhood referrals. Our Head Start partners have been signaling now for a couple of years that there are more challenging needs coming out of our birth to age 5 group, concerns around behaviors and adjustment and exposure. We talked a little bit last time about this idea of it's not do you pay or don't you pay, it's do you pay now or do you pay later with interest. And we're currently paying with interest. And I think when we get to looking at the cost-benefit analysis, you'll see how some of those costs can really add up quickly, even for a small number of students. And again, many of the 4-year-olds entering our schools, are just at a different starting spot because of opportunities they had or experiences they had growing up. None to their fault. But their starting spot in school is different, and we want to help support that. This gives a little bit more of a framework of, okay, last time I shared what these steps would be over the first year. This gives you a little bit more detail of some of the work happening here. Going into this work, we've really modeled it after the work that we've done in neighborhoods and our community school strategy. And in both of those strategies, there was no assumption made of what needed to be done. That's sometimes what happens when we see problems in front of us. We immediately jump to solutions. Well, we've got this problem. What are we going to do about it? And the work that's getting designed in our neighborhoods and our community schools is really working with communities, working with partners, working with stakeholders to help define needs and assets, to leverage assets where we can, to identify priorities, to build strategies with people so there's no assumption, like what I hope didn't come across last time, is that this isn't just a school district going it alone and we're just going to apply the interventions as we see fit. This really is a community service in the sense that we're going to bring experts and folks together to study some of the challenges, study what's at the root of these issues, and then work collaboratively to address these challenges within our community. Cost-benefit analysis. Upside of doing this work is it's upstream, it's root cause. We're really answering that question, what's really going on here? How do we help support youth before they're even in school? Really believe that there's potential for 2-generation solutions. In this context, there's no parent who's a bad parent. We go out and meet with a lot of parents, and they want what we want, but parents can only give what they got. And being able to have a 2-generation strategy where we're working with the youth, but also working with families and helping to build both is the right way to go, and is, again, modeled after some of the work that we're doing in the neighborhood and the community schools. Shared a couple research points around what does this return on investment look like. Some work had been done in implementing birth to 3 strategies where they followed some of the participants. One of the reports is 13% annual return on investment, at least through midlife. For those, see this benefit cost ratio, about every dollar that you put into birth to 3 programming, nets about $7.30. I've seen some figures related to, start in early childhood, where you start, more at like age 3. Those returns diminish. They're still positive. It's never too late to start, but your best investment ends up being in that birth to 3 area. If we don't do it, some of the things that, you know, as a system we'd be preparing for is kind of this, continue to focus on child find, and child find's a critical thing in our community, and helping to identify kids who may need services to help support development. But it is still very much like a wait to fail. We have to wait until we see something off about development to really step in and get involved. We can anticipate you know, continued trends of early childhood referrals and special education. You know, a lot of our investment would continue to go to mitigating needs that we talked quite a bit about last time. And then wanted to just frame up, you know, what do some of these costs look like, you know, when we end up having to help support youth in our schools and even in our community. So we've framed up some rough figures here. We've got some school-based support. So these are, you know, students who have maybe behavioral needs within a school or within a classroom, being able to support them with staff can be anywhere. This is a per child cost, $5,000 to $25,000 a year. One-to-one teacher assistant, you can anticipate that's about $50,000. We had asked one of our supervisors, I think he might have said upwards of maybe 20 students who have some type of individualized support within the district. One-to-one teacher, you can see the range on that. We have alternative ed services, both within our district and then contracted out, which are expensive. And then the final one isn't generally a cost that we take on, but Ms. Sukla could probably speak to some of the costs for residential programming. Those costs can get upwards of $1,000 a day. In January, the National Institute of Health had talked about, and this was specific just to drug addiction treatment for adolescents, that they're so scarce and have become so expensive. I think the average cost was $878 a day. Average 1 month stay, $26,000 as an expense for that. So it doesn't take long, you know, for kids with some of these needs for these costs really to add up.
So we have Ms. Sukla and then Dr. Sprague.
Actually, Dr. Spriggs.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you could give an example of what residential program would be. Is drug addiction counseling an example of
Yeah.
that? Or?
So it would be residential. So I think we have currently, and we're not currently funding any of these. These are all county funded, but I believe we have 6 students in full residential programming. Cholita is a good example of a local residential program. There's several out of state. We have youth within our district that have been in residential programming and down south and out west and and they're all specialized.
I
mean, we all
wasn't sure
have- yeah.
the terminology of what
Yeah.
that was referring to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah.
It's a need for early care and education, I'm not disputing it.
Yeah.
But some of these costs, many of these costs are associated with children with some pretty profound disabilities, oftentimes autism. So no matter what we do for them in early childhood, it's still not going to make them verbal or help some of their behavioral problems. I mean, a lot of times, my experience at the county where I worked, we had residential costs for, the most expensive kids were kids with some pretty profound autism that weren't verbal, got bigger than parents, expressed their needs through physical actions, made it unsafe for them to be home, and that's how they ended up in residential facilities. So I think these costs are probably fair descriptions, but I'm not sure that this early childhood would prevent all of this, because I think that it is based on a lot of kids with some pretty serious disabilities, and you know, I'm old. When a lot of kids are coming to our school district that would have never survived when I was a child, because of changes in medical technologies, and thank God they are. But some kids are living with and families are living with kids with really serious disabilities, and that's, I think, what a lot of this is about.
No, I appreciate your remarks about that. What I'm referring to, and the costs that I put up there, are students, and I have students that I'm thinking of right now when I drafted this list of kids who are otherwise typically developing. And I think you make a good point that we do have a number of students who might be in residential program because of comprehensive disabilities unrelated to early life experiences. I appreciate your point that way. We also have students who have some of those similar programming needs that are connected to early life experiences and exposure and the like.
Behavioral issues.
Right, yep, yep. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll move into strategy 2.
I just have
Yeah.
one question slash comment. So this would be to hire one person to basically study how we could implement this as a community. It's not to develop all the programming,
Right.
because the data listed here is related to fully fledged functioning programs. So I think it's a little misleading to connect the idea of hiring one person to the data shown on that slide that suggests that if we do this, then these results will happen, when
Yeah.
those studies were for much broader, fully functioning programs for a long time. And this is really just to get the ball rolling. If we wanted to more fully implement this program, it would require likely a significant amount more funding down the road.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, you know, the funds or the costs that, you know, I'm showing here are really related to current state. I mean, we have students who need these supports or these types of services and supports in our school. What we're proposing is let's work upstream. Let's get a better handle of what is really happening in the birth to 3 environment. How do we support that? The connection, and I don't want to mislead. You know, if we hire if we move forward with this proposal, put a person in place, these costs don't go to zero. You know, we still have students with needs, like Ms. Sukla talked about. We'll still have students with disabilities that are going to need those supports and services. Trying to share is really the investment in it. It's a fair amount, $100,000 to put a position in place. It doesn't take too long even if you can, you know, move the needle on, 20 students a year who might end up on this type of track, you know, we're able to avoid some of these costs later.
And
Sure.
the thought is, like with our community schools coordinators, you know, we have a position at Northside, we have a position at Hamilton. They're not doing all the work. They're connecting the resources. They're helping lower barriers, providing people access. It would be similar in this regard. In my conversations with Gunderson, they've talked about expanding community health workers. In my conversations with the health department, they've talked about trying to get upstream and do proactive stuff as well. But there isn't an inertia coordinator to connect all these pieces. And if we were able to leverage our experience and success in developing those organic strategies with the right solutions, we wouldn't have to fund all of it. We would just have that pivot point to help connect Gunderson to this community or to this parenting program, the parenting place to the outreach that they provide. Because we see the impact of it every day in our schools, and we have contact with all these disparate agencies, we're uniquely positioned to be able to help make that connection in our community for a relatively low cost. And, you know, maybe there will be something specific in the future that we would be looking at expanding, but right now I anticipate a coordinator who would help connect all these entities that to date have not been connected on this crucial issue.
Yeah, a great example that might get at maybe what you're talking about are efforts in Shoe Mullen, which is essentially a half a position that's done some of the same work, has netted partnerships with Western to be able to work on high school completion and teacher assistant certification, evening and weekend out of school time programming with Y on the Fly, parent education efforts with Parenting Place, and the like, some work with the city on some of the infrastructure right within that neighborhood. That none of that came at a cost to us, but did help improve social cohesion, social connection, and services for youth.
How is the child find on here different than the state mandated child find in the Birth to 3 program?
Same, yeah, For what I'm referring to, this would be for us, for our child find. So what would we be doing? We would continue to do child find as we're obligated to. Yeah, birth to 3 would still have child find. We would have our own special education child find, which is one of our obligations. Yeah. Okay, strategy 2 was eliminate access barriers to supportive out-of-school time opportunities and programs. The proposal here was, and we will have some changes related to out-of-school time anyway, with the north side Fund 80 site moving to Erickson anyway. But this would be for $200,000, making all of our lacrosse sites Fund 80 sites. So wanted to share a little bit of background. Hopefully you had a chance to go through this. I don't want to read all this, but just to give you context, that Boys and Girls Club has been a long-term partner with the school district, reaching back as far as 1966 with some of their athletic programs. You can see how they scaled out of school time programs across our city over time, added additional supports. We're a pivotal organization during the pandemic when we needed to offer pandemic daytime services, that we used some of the pandemic dollars to help support. Some of the current benefits related to programming, including out of school time. Kids have mental health challenges within school. Boys and Girls Club has really developed some of their mental health supports for out-of-school time care, providing programming during intersessions and non-school days and weather closures, providing meals. Last time I shared a little bit about, school represents basically 25% of awake hours. Our out-of-school time partners are often another 25%, throughout the school year, the hours after school, as well as the full day programming that they offer during summer. Give you an idea of what are the costs related to programming. So the total cost for all of the lacrosse out of school time about $1.7 million. This doesn't include athletics. This doesn't include some of their overhead, some of their administration. Mental health supports aren't factored in there, so we're just looking at a base of out-of-school time programming. Last year, this was through our ESSER out-of-school time program. We provided them $465,000. The increase, or the request for increase, is another $200,000. So Fund 80 currently supports $200,000. We would be proposing another $200,000 to help support all of the sites. Wanted to share, last time when I spoke, we have, even though it's same or similar out of school time programming, our MOU within Fund 80 for last year for Hamilton and Northside really does articulate some details that weren't necessarily articulated in general out of school time programming. So I included those up there. In the Fund 80, we've got goals and impact measures, programming around academic rotations. The staffing ratios are built within our Fund 80 MOU, which targets 10-to-1 for staffing. Includes staff training, operating procedures, invoice for actual costs that come out of that. And so under this proposal, or under this strategy, we would be expanding that MOU to make sure all of our out-of-school time sites have those conditions implemented with it. Cost-benefit considerations. So upside, we get to maintain a lot of what we were able to accomplish with ESSER out-of-school time. Talked to the Boys and Girls Club last week. Just since January to July, they've seen an 11% increase. So that's just a portion of our ESSER out of school time, 11% increase in lacrosse membership and participation, which is terrific. Means more kids have safer places to be after school. Improved staffing ratios. Last time I shared, about the secondary program and not having exactly the staffing ratios we'd prefer. This would be a chance to shore that up, eliminate financial barriers for families. Some of the costs, if we remain status quo, some things to consider there. Boys and Girls Club talked about, they do have membership fees. They do, try to provide scholarships where they can, but the school year fees you see there and summer programming fees are there. Families would also, if they didn't have that, they would be looking for other options for school year summer programming. We'd have some of the same staffing scenarios that we have. And then actually under ESSER, we had quite a bit more opportunity to be able to provide family nights and really neat outings and experiences. And those would be something that Boys and Girls Club would have to take a look at to see what they could support. Ms. Sukla?
How many families, if we did the status quo, would have to resume membership fees?
I don't have that figure. Not sure on that.
Is it so, we talked in our last meeting around 1,800, I think was the number of students
Yeah,
who
we current-
participate?
Yep.
Of those 1,800, there's some proportion that are eligible for free membership? Am I correct, at least in that assumption?
Yeah, that they have a scholarship program, for students.
Do you
Yeah.
have any estimate of what that percentage might be?
The students not attending Northside and Hamilton, which is paid for through the Community Service Fund. Joan, would you be interested in weighing in? We are fortunate to have a representative from the BGC here.
Hi, thanks for having us. So I do not have a specific number for you, but I could get you the specific number, but I can tell you that traditionally when we have charged at our lacrosse sites, I believe our collection rate is about 25%. So most of the families that frequent our programs, this doesn't count for athletics. I'm just talking about the kids who utilize our everyday kiddos that come to our after-school programs. Collection rate's about 25% at our lacrosse clubs. And the rest of those funds are funds that we have privately raised to be able to allow kids to come to the club regardless. That doesn't include our middle school and high school age students. We have always tried to provide that as a free service to kids because that's been a huge barrier of kids showing up once they reach that age limit where parents don't need a babysitter, they just need a place for their kids to hang out.
Great, that's helpful to at least put things into scope. Thanks.
Yeah, and a little more context, Joan had shared this with me too, but the actual cost, and this is donors and grants and other things for out of school time care in lacrosse, is close to $5,700 a year to help support a student. And they're subsidizing that through private donations and grants and the like. So, they do quite a bit to be able to provide opportunities for youth.
Yeah, and the benefits in there don't capture what it means to have a student come in regulated the next morning because they had a safe place to be that night, weren't exposed to abuse or neglect, who had a good meal, who had a safe place to be. Those are the experiences that we see in our schools every day because of that partnership with the Boys and Girls Club on the evenings. And then as a result of that experience at the Boys and Girls Club over the summer, helps mitigate those summer learning losses, and they come back to school with the opportunity to have had a consistent routine with people that are taking care of them, with rules and structure. And so there's these benefits that we see in the school district by ensuring that students have access to these programs on a daily and yearly basis.
I have a couple questions. So my understanding is that the out-of-school time programming provides more structure than the typical BGC programming. And one of the slides states that there are goals and impact measures. Can you share more about the structure and what the goals and impact measures are and how the school district of La Crosse holds BGC accountable to those?
Yeah, so we have, so this is specific to the Fund 80. This would be Hamilton and Northside right now. We have, I'd have to probably bring up the MOU to get into the details of it, but I know there's parts there around attendance, behavior. I believe there's a survey related to connectedness for youth. Boys and Girls Club provides us, I believe it's sent to the school, might be quarterly reports on participation rates within those programs. But the MOU is ultimately, what we've used to help structure to make sure. In the original design of the Fund 80 out of school time program was to make sure that we ended up getting to that 10-to-1 staffing ratio. Because there was obviously out of school time programming prior to the Fund 80 edition.
Were you able to find out what the average has been
For
staffing?
For
ratios?
staffing, yeah. Joan, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
So our staffing ratios are governed by the Boys and Girls Club of America for all of our clubs. Because of the Fund 80 sites, our staffing ratios are lower than what were required. So at Hamilton and at Northside Elementary, which were previously the Fund 80 sites, that staffing ratio is 1 to 10. If there's any issues with that, I think what Tegan was trying to explain last time I was watching online was that we have other full-time staff that fill in staffing ratios when we've had some issues with staffing like everyone has had. So that's definitely at 1 to 10. Our teen center, sometimes those numbers change a little bit, but none of those have ever been subject to Fund 80 requirements. And it's obviously older kids and a much less structured programming than what we're seeing for kiddos and then our elementary age students. But our general staffing ratio is 1 to 10.
At the Fund 80 sites?
At the Fund 80 sites,
Okay.
we're pretty close at our non-Fund 80 sites too.
Okay.
We've been working towards that because we've had ESSER funding. But when that ESSER funding goes away, which is imminent, that could be a concern for us.
Sure. Okay.
How will the extra funding help improve the staffing? Because isn't that what, did I understand you to say that was gonna help, some of this
Shore
funding will
up
help
the
shore up
staffing,
that
you said.
staffing? Help me, what will the money go for to help improve that if you already have that staffing ratio?
So we are able to do the 1 to 10 ratio for the, I call it our kiddos, although I'm not supposed to, our junior kids, like the 3rd through 5th grade students. We have that ratio currently because we've had the extra support of the ESSER funding. So we've been able to maintain a higher staffing level, but when the ESSER funding goes away, we don't currently have money in our budget to maintain that staffing ratio of 1 to 10. So I have the people, I just need help paying for them.
So without additional funding, then presumably the non-Fund 80 sites, you would go to the BCGSA.
BGCA.
I almost got there, I'm sorry. You'd go to that staffing ratio as the baseline.
Yes, it will
Okay.
potentially have a negative impact on our ability to maintain those lower ratios.
And what is the general staffing ratio at BGC of America?
It's different for all clubs, but they usually recommend that we stay at least 1 to 20.
1 to 20?
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't think we personally at our club try never to go in excess of 1 to 15.
Sure, okay.
Any other questions on strategy 2? Strategy 3, so this is the graduation specialist. If you remember, the frame for this, or the ask for this would be $65,000 to help support one of the graduation specialist programs. A little bit of context for that. So the total cost of the program, you can see there, a little over $140,000. The Fund 80 contribution would be $65,000. And then same thing, we would be designing a Fund 80 MOU. We currently have an MOU with Boys and Girls Club where we didn't fund it. We had some grant funds, and then Boys and Girls Club had some other dollars to help support it. But we would frame this around a Fund 80 MOU that outlined the program sites and impact measures and services and the like. A lot of this currently exists in our existing MOU with them. Cost benefit analysis, so, upside is we maintain this programming that we've been able to have. It has produced a viable graduation pathway for students. 100% of the students that participated who were seniors last year did graduate last year, which is terrific. Serves about 60 youth, about 30 youth at each campus. If this went away, talking with Boys and Girls Club, likely they'd move to more of a single campus support. They still have funding for one of the positions. That position's up at Logan High School, so they would likely maintain a single campus program. Obviously, they could only serve the 30 students that they serve up there. We talked a little bit about a split campus approach. What would that look like? And there's some inefficiency with that. Traveling in between schools and your ability to be available for students throughout the day. One thing that Boys and Girls Club had mentioned is, part of the grant that they're working on does require some component of matching funds, which they've been able to maintain because they matched those grant funds. So that's something we'd have to work through as well.
You're first.
Just a
Yours
quick one.
beaten.
Is the 30 students annually in the single campus support, is that 30 is the capacity of the
Right.
program, or is that an anticipated need?
That is the capacity, yep.
And I would say anticipated need, it's, they graduate a certain number of students, but it's from each grade level, they're helping students, meet their daily needs. And it's students that aren't identified for other programs like integrated supports or lacrosse roads, these are unique students that are also at risk. So it's another layer of support for students that need a person to help get them across the finish line.
Who without this program would otherwise be falling through the gaps and likely not graduating?
We don't have a program to backfill this.
But this is a $140,000 program. Where's the rest of the funding come from? And is that secured or is that in application?
Yeah, that is secured by grants, is a portion of that, and I think Boys and Girls Club also. Do you know the breakdown of that 140?
I know that, so, one of the positions, we get $65,000 in a grant that has been secured by the Boys and Girls Club State Alliance from the state of Wisconsin. So that's why one of those positions is mostly funded, and then we just privately raise money for the remainder of that position. And yes, that grant we get that every year. So that will maintain at least one position for next year. What we're looking for is support for a second position.
I had inquired, can we double that grant from the Boys and Girls Club in the State Alliance? That's not possible. We're fortunate to have one, so for us to serve both campuses well, it would require us to figure that out.
We have been working for 3 years to change that, but how the State Alliance is set up is because we're one organization. It doesn't matter how many kids we're serving, we're only entitled to one grant for one graduation specialist for all of the clubs we serve. So we have designated, even though we're in other districts, we are just serving the lacrosse school district. And previously, we were able to support 2 of those positions through other sources. And this year, we only have the one grant from the Boys and Girls Club State Alliance.
Joan, is that position housed at the Erickson Club?
No, both of those positions are housed in the school district, and they actually run a class period every period. So I actually have a hard time with those employees because they don't get to use their PTO unless they can find a substitute teacher to cover their classes. So they are in a class, they have their own classrooms within each school building, and they are in classes all day long. They also do some after-school tutoring depending on what the needs are in the beginning of the year. As we're waiting for the kids who have graduated, I think 7 graduated, for example, from Central last year. While we're waiting for student services to identify and help fill those 7 spots. I know last year at the beginning of the year, Allie, who was our specialist, she ran an open tutoring after school from 3 to 4:30 for any kids in the Central cafeteria. So they do more than just what's on their caseload, but obviously their caseload is their primary focus.
I know they're picking kids up and making phone calls and worried about attendance and all the things that you would want somebody
Yeah.
who cares
Some
about
of
kids
what
to
they do, they teach kids and reinforce and work with the teachers on specific assignments and things like that. But then there is also the layer of, why aren't you in class today? Where are you? Calling parents, providing basic necessities, personal hygiene, et cetera. So they cover the gamut.
So if we double our capacity to run this program, and we're looking at 60 students instead of 30.
I was hoping you were gonna go 120, but we'll settle for
Hey,
60.
well, I guess my question is, what is our actual need here? Does this program stand to relieve pressure from some of those other kinds of aids that students have been identified for? But you just said these are also students who have not been identified for other kinds of interventions. And I guess my real question is, how many of those students that are out there that we know we're not serving in some way right now? Is it more than 60?
We'd have to do a more accurate assessment to talk to the principals. I'm sure it's more than 60 across, the,
Well, and the,
yeah,
this proposal would
50
be,
kids we graduate or have.
What was your point?
isn't this proposal to replace one, not actually add, so we wouldn't be doubling?
We just wanna,
She's nodding yes, you're saying
funding
no.
is falling through, right? So we wanna be able to
Replacing.
maintain two as opposed to
Yes.
going back to one.
Replacing funding that's.
Right, but it
currently
wouldn't
there.
double what they're doing, we would be maintaining. what they're
Maintaining,
doing.
that's correct.
I'm
Okay.
sorry,
Yep.
I misspoke.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you,
Anything else
Joan.
on strategy 3? Okay, strategy 4, proposal here was to add one school resource officer. So a little bit of structure to that. Shared last time just some of the trends that we've been seeing. Total cost to the program, what we're projecting is about this $453,000. Salary and benefits for 4 school resource officers. Our contribution, if you remember last time I spoke about the 75% of 75% calculation, would be right around $255,000. We've had an MOU with the police department for quite some time. That is nearly a model MOU that outlines roles and responsibilities and what they should be involved in, and outlines the function of the SRO committee and provides for annual updates. So, if we were to move on this, we would begin working on updating that MOU and working on new assignments, distribution of assignments. Questions on that? Projected benefits, upside is we've got stronger SRO response rates. That's where we're starting to see some differences, especially up on the north side. Some more timely response rates for calls for service for lower level type of offenses. So those are some of the upsides there. Projected cost of status quo, we'd have, some of the same challenges that we have now, delays, limited coverage, when SROs need to be out, police department is also struggling with recruiting too, so oftentimes when someone's out, there isn't, another person that they're able to, put on assignment and support. Anyway, that frames out the SRO proposal, yeah.
If I'm remembering from our last meeting correctly, from the workshop, one of the data points was the number of calls for service that had to end up being handled by a normal policeman.
Yeah.
Right? And so one of the projected benefits of this would presumably be lowering that percentage, right?
Yep, yeah.
And I guess I'm curious, I don't recall that we had, I'm trying to think of what it is I'm asking for. It's like a gap analysis almost on so we're seeing a higher rate of calls. Is there an analysis on whether or what percentage of those calls are for situations that are more appropriately delegated to other parts of our behavior and disciplinary processes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one of the activities of the SRO advisory committee is to look at all calls for service.
Right.
And we do take a sample. We take a random sample of a
a couple weeks of calls for service and share that report out. And that's where we're looking at things like that, like, are we getting SROs involved in things that they shouldn't be? And we really have not seen that. There's been a couple things where we've had to do some follow-up because it wasn't, totally clear, but, by and large, we're just seeing a range of things from, and they're handling things in and around the school. Someone in the neighborhood had reported some activity in the neighborhood, and so they reached out to the SRO for that. So that is one of our checks with that. And then we're really looking at the percentage of calls that are handled exclusively by an SRO. Being one of the goals of the program is to make sure that a specially trained officer can respond to those calls. And where we're seeing a little bit more stabilization on the south end of town, on the north side, we're starting to see that drop. So.
Yeah, historically, we've involved school resource officers in things that were supervision of cafeterias or responding to, profanity or kicking a garbage can, things that were clearly school discipline and school responsibilities. That has shifted over time, and it certainly over the last 4 years has completely shifted away, and we feel confident that our administrators are funneling the right things to our school resource officers, or they're being called for the right things. And that snapshot that we look at each year helps reinforce that.
Right, and I think Ms. Sprang's gonna talk a little bit about budget.
So this is the proposed Fund 80 budget and tax levy based on the additional requests. The levy itself is much less than the budget because some of those things are not levy supported. But if you look on levy supported budget, that would be the increase for the budget and then also for the tax levy. And so it's broken down in areas, including the costs that we have proposed additional.
And our current estimates of state aid, revenue limits, all that other stuff, we show an increase in state aid, which will reduce our tax levy regardless of the Fund 80 levy, relatively substantially, maybe over $2 million. Our levy might be $2 million less than last year, so just empirically fewer dollars levied. And in terms of mill rate, it could be more than 50 cents less than last year is what our current estimates show. And so this modest increase in Fund 80 will have very little impact on the perceived tax rates in our school district. Our school-based taxes should go down for homeowners across the city.
The numbers here are just the increases, or this,
This
because
would be the total levy, which includes those increases. Here, I have some more detail for you that it might help. One of them is the history. And you'll notice that back in 2019-20, the levy for the SROs was actually more than 255,600. I think we had 4 back then, or we had 5. We had 5. So, so of course we reduced that when we reduced the amount of number of SROs that we had. But that gives you some history of the levy itself, and then the history of the budget. Remember when we were doing fund balance designation, that we had those extra dollars left that are in fund balance, that we take that away from what we have to levy, but they're included in the cost, the budget for it. The other area I would share with you would be the detail of what kind of programs fall into each category of this Fund 80. And you will see that the increases that we're proposing are in green, and the other amounts are the status quo, what we've had to levy in the past.
Ms. Sprain, your handouts are very helpful. I wish we'd have got those ahead of time. That
Thank you.
would have been helpful.
So in the, so you could line up the detail with the summary up above of the proposal.
There's no motion on the table?
So I think we have reached the end of our presentation from Mr. Teff and from Ms. Sprang on the Community Service Fund Levy budget. So at this time, we could accept a motion in a second, if there is one to be brought forward by the board members.
Would this be an appropriate time to ask to table this, to bring forward to a future meeting with some additional information? I'm struggling with being able to say I approve, I agree with it, or I disagree with it, because I feel like they talked about goals and evaluations that I'm not clear what they are, and I think there's pieces that are just missing in my mind. I hate to say no because I don't know those answers, but I hate to say yes, because we're asking for an increase here, and while we're going out for a referendum, telling the community we don't have enough money to run our schools, and so I wanna make sure we do this in the right way.
There's always an opportunity to offer a motion to table, and if there's a second, then we can move a conversation in a vote. But Dr. Engel, I interrupted you.
Sorry, yeah, the impact would be, we would hope to have a school resource officer there as soon as possible. Those calls for service, happen continually, so the sooner we have that available, it would be great. Same thing for out-of-school time opportunities for our students at the Boys and Girls Club. Right now, we're funding those programs for the summer, but as soon as school starts, that funding will dry up and students won't have access like they have historically, and we'll have to start thinking about notifying parents that they're gonna have to start paying fees again. The early childhood piece, that certainly can wait. Obviously, every day we wait, there's a built-up cost. And then the graduation specialist, we would love to get off to a great start there as well. And so there are some impacts. We want to build the budget for the board so that it's, ready on October, to certify the levy. When we build the budget book, we like to have everything ready by the second meeting in September. And so having an understanding of how we're gonna proceed by early September is crucial so that we can build the budget and present the board something comprehensive there.
In addition, as part of my announcements, we are going to have a very, very short meeting on September 9th, only 30 minutes long, because we do have board training, and we also have a neighborhood meeting at 6, that starts at 6:30. And then on the 23rd, the board meeting is going to be very much geared towards OE 11 and its entirety. So that usually takes quite a bit of time, and so we are getting very pressed for time in regards to having this conversation and getting to a place where we can have a vote if we were to table it. So for what it's worth. Mr. Minka.
If we were to make a motion on this, it would be in regards to all 4 of these proposals, all in one.
That would be a good place to start.
We're presenting the budget as a whole. We think all those programs are crucial for supporting our students. The board can do what it will there. I certainly understand your point, Ms. Sukla, in terms of feeling rushed. We want to make sure that folks have the information that they need. We can pull up MOU goals and statements if folks want to look at that information. If folks feel it's necessary, we can provide that information as well.
I feel that I either need to get answers to questions, or I'm gonna have no choice but to vote no, and I don't know that that's a good option either, and I understand the rush, but I'd rather make the right decision and not be forced into it because of time constraints.
And we can call special board meetings as well, as soon as 24 hours from now.
that might be a little more challenging to get everybody together, but also, you know, we did have a workshop where we provided quite a bit of information, and I know that it's always a wish and an ideal to have as much information as possible, as detailed as possible. So I do understand that.
And if there are any additional questions, I'm sure we can track down that information quickly, get it to folks.
If you don't take action tonight, you would have to take action on the 9th.
Yeah.
And I think that's doable, but, I don't wanna discuss things, cause I don't feel like there's a motion on the table. If I put on a motion to table it, if it goes down in flames, then we're forced to have to vote on, I'm struggling with what to do at this moment.
We're gonna need a motion at some point in order to
Can
move
we
on.
vote on them individually?
It is up to the board for whatever motion they would like to.
We just have to
I would
first.
prefer that, and then we can, whatever we're not able to find a consensus to, we're able to get forward to on the next board meeting.
I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, but I agree with several of the sentiments that Deb has shared, and I've asked almost the same questions the last 2 meetings and shared some of my questions in a one-on-one, and they still are unanswered with regard to the second proposal. This is money we're levy. It's not, I mean, this is not a decision to be taken lightly, I don't think. And so I do sort of resent the implication that if we don't act now, there's gonna be consequences or extra board meetings when we've been pretty clear about what our questions have been, and they still are unanswered. I don't really have many reservations about the third and fourth proposals. I personally would feel ready to vote on those tonight. I understand what we're getting into with the first proposal, but what I don't understand with that would be like, what would be the like ideal goal with that program? Because it wouldn't end up just being one coordinator position. There would have to be something else added to that. So like, what else would we be looking to potentially levy down the road for that program? Because I don't super understand Ms. Sprain's comment earlier about anything you levy for in Fund 80, you have to use for the same purpose year after year. So if we didn't, like if we piloted number 1, for example, and it didn't produce the benefits we anticipated, could we just stop using that? Like, how does that work?
For example, if we levied $100,000, but the cost of the program for a year was only $80,000, and so there was a $20,000 balance remaining, we couldn't move that to some other use in the future. It would have to be used for an early childhood type program. And so we would just have to figure out how to spend that in the future in that particular area. And I would say to your first question about ideal goal is that it would simply be a coordinator. Much like our community school coordinators at our schools, we're not levying additional funds for, you know, their additional programming and things that are going on. They're just coordinating that, connecting people, you know, identifying the resources and connecting it to the folks that are needing that. My hope would be that the ideal goal is that we'd be hiring an individual who could connect all these pieces together and create something more from its pieces than is currently being produced.
So we're not creating programming.
We would ideally be creating very little programming. It would be connecting people or identifying the type of programming that the folks that would prefer these services want, and then connecting them to an entity that is able to provide that through their subject matter expertise. So, for example, we might talk to, like with one of our neighborhoods, the folks there wanted a less threatening way to talk about parenting, and so created the concept of parenting cafes, kind of a drop-in thing and chat, worked with the parenting place to help facilitate that sort of thing. And so our, functionally half-time person in that neighborhood wasn't creating the programming. They were finding out what the programming should look like, connecting them to a resource in our community that could deliver that well because they're experts at it. That didn't happen before we facilitated that collaboration because nobody asked the folks what they needed. And the organization, while prepared to deliver that, didn't have the capacity to go out and identify that need. And so we're uniquely positioned through our experience as community school coordinators and neighborhood impact coordinators, to be able to make those connections to facilitate that. And our interest is that it materially impacts us every single day.
So are there birth to 3 or birth to 5 sites in town that have capacity to take on more referrals? That's my because like.
Well, the birth to 3 program is funded by the state, which is for kids with some percentage of disabilities. They've changed the percentage, so I don't know what it is, and they have to serve all the kids that are eligible. So that might mean the county has to add staff,
Okay.
or actually, they contract out with the parenting place for that program. But that's for kids with disabilities, but I don't think this proposal is limited to that.
And one of the challenges with Child Find is, a way I think about it is, if a student hits 2nd grade and they're identified with a disability that should have been identified far earlier,
Yeah.
there was a gap there. There was an opportunity to identify that student with a significant developmental delay or a physical disability far earlier than we did. But in a community as large as ours, it's hard to kind of accurately find those folks. By connecting our agencies, by reaching out to parents in ways that are more desirable to them, we'll be able to get ahead of some of those child find issues. And early intervention for a special education need will yield results in 2nd grade. Maybe they're dismissed from special ed, maybe the issue's mitigated, maybe instead of needing a one-on-one aid all day, they need like part-time support. So we go from a $50,000 cost to a $5,000 cost. You know, there's that upstream impact of child find on the special education side would dramatically help. But we couldn't do that ourselves. You know, we have a person who tries to do a lot of that ourselves. By working with providers, working with daycares, working with community organizations, we can help get ahead of that. So we shouldn't have to do that work, we just need to connect all that work.
Got it.
So to advance this conversation, I make a motion that we approve the funding for the additional SROs and the option number 3.
The graduation.
The graduation one, thank you. I'll make that motion, then I've got some comments. And the other 2, I'm not saying we don't do, I just don't feel prepared to approve those at this time.
Well, there's a motion on the table.
Second.
I will second, yes.
So now there's a motion and a second to fund strategy 3 and 4 of the Community Partnership Fund 80 proposal. Discussion.
And we take up 1 and 2.
Well, at this point, we're just gonna talk about 3 and 4. We can come back to determine what to do with
This motion doesn't
that.
exclude ever
Right.
discussing
So right-
1 and 2.
But this is gonna make a difference whether I vote yea or nay. I mean, if we're not gonna go forward with 1 and 2 in terms of
This-
doing something.
Well,
My
but they're not
intent-
mutually exclusive.
No,
though.
they're not.
I
All
believe
4
1 and 2
programs.
need to be taken up at
Basically,
another.
per Robert's Rules of Orders, what is happening right now is, it would be described as dividing the question. So instead of taking the entire question of Fund 80 and taking a motion to yea or nay the whole thing, we are taking it in pieces. And so right now, the only pieces we are discussing are 3 and 4. That does not exclude nor include any action on strategies 1 and 2. So after this motion is concluded, somebody else could make a motion to do something with strategies 1 and 2.
Correct. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Am I accurate in characterizing at least the graduation specialist proposal as maintaining our ability to do what we've been doing?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay, and if we don't, we lose that capacity right away.
Correct.
Okay.
My questions that I have are really about, I mean, I'm struggling with, we have people on fixed income, so increasing a levy, I understand that there might be a change in another levy, but until that's in front of me, I can't decide on that. But again, if we're going to a community referendum saying we have to close schools because we don't have enough money, but we're gonna spend an extra amount of money to doing things, and I think these are all worthy things. We could make a list 10 times bigger than this of all worthy things we could add.
I've got one.
Yeah, you've got way more than one.
This is a modest ask compared to my dreams and aspirations.
But I mean, these are all good things, and I think that's what I'm struggling with in being honest with and transparent with the community, saying we gotta cut costs, but hey, we wanna add these cool new things. I'm struggling with that. The biggest piece where I'm struggling with the other two is what are the goals? What are the
Well,
input
let's,
measures?
I would keep our conversation
Okay.
just on 3 and 4.
Okay,
If we want to talk about 1 and 2 and details about those, then we need to have a motion to discuss those. So let's just stick to 3 and 4
well, I
at this
also
point.
would, again, I think the goals and input measures are more clear on these. The other piece that I don't know that is this one, and I know it gets into two that I'm not supposed to talk about, but, we have community partners who have private funding, who are, I feel like there's a curtain and I don't know what's on the other side of the curtain. I don't know what the private funding has provided, where it has gone, and I'm struggling with that. And again, we're supposed to be the funder of last resort, so that's a piece that I don't know some of the answers. I think the 65,000 is a modest amount of money, so I can bite the bullet and live with that one. It's something we've already been doing, but that is another piece that I've struggled with.
Well, we should call the question.
Question has been called, so the motion again is to fund strategies 3 and 4. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion has carried, so now we are back to determining what we want to do with strategies 1 and 2.
I make a motion to table strategies 1 and 2,
Until,
the next meeting.
okay, so
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
the motion is to table strategies 1 and 2 until our next meeting, September 9th.
When we can get additional information on the goals and the input measures and the program evaluation.
Can I provide that right now?
Well, right
Can
now,
you provide that right now?
before, hold on. We have a motion, we don't have a second. So right now, there is nothing. I need a second in order to start the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Mendes.
So is there a second on this motion to table? Okay, I do not hear a second, so the motion dies for lack of a second. So then we move on to, is there another motion on strategies 1 and 2?
I move to approve strategy 1.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve strategy 1, the proposal from the Community Partnerships and Fund 80 presentation that we had. We have a second. Is there any discussion?
Can Dr. Engel provide some of that detail you teased?
I think that was more related to
Strategy
strategy 2, if I'm not
Alright.
mistaken.
Okay.
If you look at strategy 1, it's a relatively comprehensive design as far as what's listed there as the activity.
I'd like to return to what I was understanding as Ms. Berkedal's question around if we're hiring an individual to do the work of coordination, but it needs assessment is the first thing laid out here. And am I misunderstanding that if that needs assessment points us to X, Y, and Z, isn't there a presumption that there is an existing agency providing capacity to serve X, Y, and Z? And if not, then we are looking at structuring our own programming over the medium to long term.
Potentially, we'd have to come back and ask for that, obviously. So as an example, I was having a conversation with the CEO of Gunderson, and they were talking about Amplify Health, talking about
Not yet.
not yet. Talking about expansion of community health workers as a way to address population health. We've talked about that with mental health as an opportunity to bill through insurance, to reduce costs. There's a variety of ways to address some of these things. And an example would be to use that community health worker to address early childhood interventions. Conversations with Great Rivers United Way, potentially seeking grant funding for a position like that. Conversations with the county health department to refocus some of their efforts towards early interventions. Conversations with the parenting place about some of the services they could provide. The initial step, though, is to find out what the folks who are experiencing this need. It is a lot of hubris and failed efforts in the past to go in and say, we think you need this, and tell them what to do. As opposed to working alongside with people, finding out what they need. That takes some time, if you're gonna do it well. And so mapping the community, identifying need.
So the community health worker model, the community health workers only work with individuals on reimbursable pathways. So they wouldn't be able to engage in conversations on birth to 3 with folks unless they had a pathway to be reimbursed for their time related to that conversation. That's why the community health worker program is pretty prescriptive as to what they're able to talk to people about, and some people have concerns about the program because of that. They're not as flexibly able to address any need that comes up, which is why some agencies like St. Clair Health Mission, for example, have employed their own community health workers outside of the GRU hub or outside of Gunderson or wherever, because they more flexibly are able to work with folks on their individual needs rather than what's reimbursable. So I would
What I was
look into
hoping to
that.
offer was examples of conversations we've had with folks who are interested in this endeavor, not a specific model for success. So there are lots of people we're talking to who are interested in getting upstream, worried about early childhood. It's not just us, you know, and so the goal isn't for us to be footing the bill for a program that never ends in its expansion, but to connect people to the needs that they identify with resources that may be available in our community, or we collaborate to create new opportunities.
Other questions?
I think my main issue with number 1 and number 2 in general, but I'll stick to number 1.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is these are requests for new dollars. And it's hard for me to remove, like, I worked as a grantor for a long time. And when we receive requests for new dollars, there's expectations of the applicant related to what you're gonna show for the money. And with number 1, we have some projected benefits which are based on an assumption that we will increase services of birth to 3, which we don't know for sure that we can. And it's just hard for me to distill from the information that we've been provided what we can expect as far as outcomes. So
I agree. I agree. And there is value to the needs assessment in itself for our community. But is there value justifying our expense of levying new dollars and doing it? Like,
I mean, I can put together a plan that says we'll work on smoking cessation, we'll work on parenting visit or home visits with nurses, we will provide early literature in homes, we'll give 100 books to every kid, we will ensure that kids have basic needs met, and I can put together a plan that says we're gonna do this to these people.
But is that creating a new program or coordinating?
That would be me saying, you need this. We're gonna tell you what you need, and this is what you're gonna get. And that will have very measurable outcomes that you can feel satisfied we are going to achieve, guaranteed. But if we're going to take a little bit of a risk, if we're going to trust our community to give us the response that they tell us what they need, then we have to give up a little bit of control over exact outcome measures in the short term, knowing that 1 year from now, we'll be able to come back to you with what our community has said they need and a pathway for connecting them to those resources. We cannot take that risk and it'll never happen. Or we can take that risk, invest in the future, have a vision for what this could be, and move forward.
I think personally we should take that risk. I saw so many kids coming to Hamilton Elementary School that if they would have had something 2 years previous, it would have made a significant difference, I feel. And I believe it's our job to see what we can do to make a difference for kids.
you don't have to sell me on the value of birth to 3 programming. I mean, in particular, literacy interventions, just
Yes.
the mere presence of reading material in the home, which is low cost, but sometimes has a significant barrier to access, makes immensely measurable differences at graduation time. That's proven for 50 years.
I say, you know, we worry about catching kids up. I say, why do you let them fall behind?
I've spent a career working with early childhood programs, and I'm not saying this is a bad idea per se. I do struggle with, is this the district's job to come up with it? I mean, would it be the district's person? It'd be helpful to me if the parenting place in Gunderson or United Way or somebody came and said, this is important to us, we could support this. I'm struggling with that. I mean, I get it's a good idea. I also struggle with the timing of it and the referendum that we have. That's where I'm just struggling with being able to support this right now.
I listened to a Healy that came to town to talk about helping homeless people, and somebody said, well, if we help too many homeless people, won't more homeless people come? And her comment was, you can either stick your head in the sand and say it doesn't exist, or you can do something about it. So I maintain we do something about it.
Any other comments?
Yeah, the handouts from Ms. Sprain are very helpful. That'd been nice to get those in advance. Thank you. I really like them. Thank you.
Can you at least share what types of follow-up information you'll provide to the board on how this, if approved, how this program is performing?
Absolutely. So, following that design details, it would start with a needs and assets assessment. So it would involve, some surveys, although those have limited effectiveness with their target population, probably. So we'd be looking at home visits, knocking doors, working with our existing birth to 3 partners, working with child care centers, to work with parents to get information from them directly about what it is that they're needing and experiencing through all of those partners, working with providers at the hospitals, to distribute surveys and get that information. Clearly defining those needs and then the factors that are impacting those families, and then conducting a root cause analysis. So these are the symptoms that we're seeing that are related from parents, the needs that they're identifying. What is the root cause? Trying to get further upstream so that we're not constantly treating symptoms, not handing out food bags every day, but helping folks get jobs to be self-sufficient, as an example. And then developing an action plan with our partners. Hopefully a committee that involves parents who are in this target audience to develop evidence-based strategies, things that have worked in other places, both communities in Wisconsin, like Appleton and Verona, places that we know have similar type programs, but also evidence-based across the nation from things like Harvard. And then developing an evaluation framework for those strategies that we put together. If we do this, then we should see this outcome. And so those would be the specific measurables. So you can think of it like a year of putting together a grant application in a way. Here is going to be the measurables that we'll get based on the needs and root cause analysis and the logic model that we put together. Those evaluation frameworks then will allow us to seek partners to execute that. So if one of the things that we're identifying is some of our parents struggle with substance abuse, then working with various agencies to identify programs to minimize the impact of substance abuse, either prenatally, in utero, postnatally, et cetera. Or it might be a literature issue. There's not enough books in homes. Are there opportunities to work with Scholastic or a local donor who's really excited about that to get 100 books for every kid at birth and partner with Gunderson, Mayo, other local hospitals to distribute that to local residents? So I could see a lot of different things coming out of it, but the evaluation framework would say, maybe more literacy materials in homes. What would that look like? How would we know? Access to smoking cessation programs. What would that look like? How would we know? And on and on. So we would have 1 year from now, if not sooner, a clear pathway for what we're going to approach and how we would know if we would be successful. I would say if we couldn't deliver on that, you could say like, we're not going to fund this again.
Mr. Minka?
I struggle to understand this. I think like the more we're speaking about this here, so first it came like a cloud of are we trying to create a new program, or are we trying to coordinate between our programs here? But now I'm hearing is that we're going to be helping kids before they enter into our school districts or before they're, where a lot of these kids that are here, they might not even be our students, where it's a good idea, but it's, I guess, not a return of investment on us, it's a return of investment on children, you could argue, but it's not really from the schools, from my understanding here. That's kind of putting, it's kind of like us trying to micro-parent before kids are even inside of our schools, and unfortunately, I mean, there are some, I could think of some parents who would appreciate a program like this. I know unfortunately there's a lot of them who wouldn't. You talked particularly about substance abuse. I don't see any kind of school program that could really too much help without that. I need to learn more about this too, but I guess just from my understanding and from seeing, I mean, I'm talking about personal experience too here. So that's a very hard and very complicated thing. You can't just have a coordinator kind of just help for it. There's a lot of kids who are under a lot of legal problems because of their parents. I mean, we have, I'd say, a crisis nationally of having dysfunctional families. The majority or a large percent of families are considered dysfunctional. Like, what exactly is our role we're defining in this year? And that's where I'm kind of struggling to see this year, is we're adding this when every family is unique.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. It would be great to have a coordinator, but I struggle to see how exactly this would be able to help us. Where we're kind of, from what I'm understanding here, it looks like we're kind of grasping at straws, trying to see what we can help with, and I hope this is just misunderstanding on my part, but I'm still struggling to understand this, just talking more about this. It's giving more questions to me than answers.
Yeah, so you talk about telling people how to parent. This would be the exact opposite of that. We'd be asking parents what it is that they need. And so providing and connecting them to resources. And you're right, we don't have a substance abuse program, but we know folks in the community that do. And maybe they're not accessing it because of some barrier. And so being able to connect people to those resources that already exist would be the role of this coordinator. Not to create a substance abuse program, but to connect them to one where they could already be successful. So our goal isn't to tell parents how to do their job, but to provide literature, resources, opportunities, access to the things that research shows leads to healthy developing children who are mentally healthy, at school, ready to learn, on track to graduate, out of the criminal justice system. The goal would be to connect people to what they need based on what they tell us. And so it's very organic, user-generated.
I think it's fair to assume that not everyone would access the programs, but I disagree also with the characterization that it would be microparenting. I think you said that well, Dr. Engel, and I think if I'm kind of echoing Mr. Bagnevsky, what you said before, that the trade-off is sort of like, we could do nothing for fear that not 100% of people would access the programming, but we would lose out on the benefits of the percentage, potentially the vast majority that would. So that's the way I would kind of frame the argument there.
I feel like I still have a lot of questions, but I also feel like part of leadership is taking risks, and I think the potential pitfall or the benefits outweigh the risk of trying it out for a year and see how things go, and then when the board looks at it again in a year and has more granular information to see how the program is performing, at that point you'd have more to go on to decide whether to continue or
Where
not.
I still struggle though is a year's not enough time to
That's
get
also true.
to get data showing, to realize that 13% return on investment, like that is downstream, and we're aware of that. So I also agree with you that, I think there's a point where we have to try something,
You
right?
called a question.
Question has been called, so the motion before us is to fund strategy 1, the proposal. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Sounded like the ayes have it, but to be clear, I would like to take a roll call to verify that.
Mr. Alberts?
Aye.
Mr. Vignuski?
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Mr. Manka?
Nay.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Nay.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. So then the ayes do have it, and strategy 1 is funded, and the only one that is left is strategy 2. Is there a motion in regard to strategy 2?
Well, we gotta start there. I'll make a motion to fund strategy 2.
Great. So that's the motion you're making, Dr. Sprague?
Yep.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Dr. Sprague, seconded by Mr. Bagneski to fund strategy 2, the Empower Youth Beyond the School Day. Discussion.
So just for clarification, this is to maintain our support or to expand our support
For the out-of-school
yeah.
time.
Partially to expand, right? To make all the sites fund 80 sites?
It would be to make all sites fund 80 sites. It would be a drastic reduction from our commitment from the last 2 years, but it would be maintaining student to staff ratios and free access to all 4 sites.
But the funding from the last 4 years was from the ESSER grant, correct? So this is your big moment. Tell us what you know that we haven't heard yet about what is the out-of-school time program, what does that structure look like, and how does that differ from traditional BGC programming? That's my first question.
If, Joan, if you wouldn't mind.
So I think in part the question is, in your mind, what is traditional BGC after-school programming? BGC after-school programming, even 5 years ago, is completely different than what BGC after-school programming is today. So if you attend our BGC after-school programming, you have immediate access to mental health support from licensed therapists that are employees at the Mayo Clinic. So for example, their mental health support through Fund 80 was able to facilitate 16 trainings for BGC staff. We did 6 psychoeducation groups facilitated with the students at Central and Logan High School as part of the B grade graduate members. That would be an example of a cost that is not covered by that $60,000 that we just asked for a second support member. We had 83 BGC members that participated in specific targeting program with our youth and family services directors at our La Crosse BGC locations. 77% of those BGC members were discharged, meeting their identified goals. We had 13 BGC members complete our Smart Moves program, which is a BGCA program that promotes healthy choices and substance use prevention, and that's just at one of our locations. That's not all the locations that we serve. So everyone has access to mental health providers, and not just mental health providers, but one thing the school district uses a lot is social and emotional learning. And so we also implement SEL into all of our programming that we do. Everybody does Math Hoops, participates in some after-school academic targeted services. At some locations, we have increased. We're piloting a program right now that we developed in Holman that we are working on at Hamilton. So there are kids that get really specific educational tutoring needs in conjunction with needs identified by the actual teachers in the school district. But even if you're not one of those kids, every day you participate in some kind of reading assistance or math homework, things along those lines. In addition to that, just the structured of rotations. So it's not that kids come into the Boys and Girls Club and are in the gym and just kind of running free and wild. They're divided by age appropriate groups into age-appropriate activities, some of which are developed by our own staff, which is usually college students that are in school at either UWL or Viterbo and sometimes TC for early childhood development. The rest of which programs are programs that are developed by the Boys and Girls Club of America, which has many, many, many well-educated teachers developing really specific programs for specific age groups and what kids need. So we have that in combination with our youth and family services directors, in combination with our full-time staff, many of whom have graduated from school with an education degree or are pursuing that degree. So the programming in general is pretty specific. That doesn't include all the extra activities we have. For example, Train and City Brewery have a partnership where they come in and run 8-week sessions with some of our third, fourth, and fifth grade kids to work on really targeted STEM programming. We have fine arts, we have cooking clubs. The fine arts, you can get voice lessons, you can get violin lessons, guitar lessons, all of that. We don't charge anything for that. That's all covered in the membership. So BGC, even 5 or 10 years ago, is very different than what BGC looks like now. It's really intentional, targeted programming based on needs that have been identified throughout the community, as well as through the school districts and needs of teachers and students and our families. And because of the ESSER funding and some of the Fund 80, we've been able to really hone in and increase the offerings that we have for kids that attend our after-school programs.
As we transitioned away from year-round school at Hamilton, the Boys and Girls Club was able to develop full-day programming that allowed families to have an option year-round, essentially, you know, between the school district and the BGC from 7:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. And so that has been a nice partnership as well.
And I have heard a couple of times people asking questions about how are we utilizing the rest of our resources. So we're still raising as much money, we're raising more money than we've ever raised before for private donations. But the key is that the cost of raising children has quadrupled. I don't know the actual, you know, how much it has increased, but we all know with inflation, the cost of raising a child has increased dramatically. So it no longer costs us $1,000 a year to be able to provide all of these services. As I think Kurt had mentioned, we're at about $5,700 per child, which is really cost effective. That's lower than the average for Boys and Girls Club of America. They usually estimate that clubs of a similar size and budget that we have, it costs about $8,500 to serve one child. We serve for less than that, and we have far more offerings than most after-school programs.
Is that 5,700 like averaged across all the various programs that you talked about?
Yeah, so that's actually a really specific number. There are ways for me to make that number look much more appealing to all of you, but I wanted to be really, really conservative in how we determined that number. So that doesn't cover all of our administrative cost, our facility cost, does not cover the mental health services that we provide. There's all sorts of things that are left out of that. That has nothing to do with our athletic kids. Those are the kids that are at club almost every day. If you saw some of the previous data that was provided to you with regards to Fund 80, it talked a lot about kids that were there 30 days or more. That number is far bigger than the number of kids that we serve every single day. So I used the most conservative numbers I could. I also think it's interesting to note that the cost of serving a kid in the La Crosse school district is more than it is in any of our other school districts by over $1,000. So the kids that we're serving in La Crosse County, or in the La Crosse school district, it takes more to serve those kids.
Joan, you described really well what your programming looks like. Is the out-of-school time programming the same as your general programming?
That's the out-of-school time program for
That's what you
everyone.
described?
Yep,
Okay.
everybody does that. So there are some programs that are even more specific and targeted. So for example, case management from our mental health providers, that's not for every single child at BGC. That's for kids who are identified through school, and through staff and through our after-time program that need that extra help, and then parents have to sign on to that. Same with our Sales to Success, our like really targeted tutoring program. That's a separate service. All kids are eligible for it, but do all kids utilize it? No. But the other things that I described previously, that's if you come to our after-school program, that's what you do. Yes.
I realize I did a really bad job explaining how awesome the Boys and Girls Club is. And maybe it's because I've had the pleasure of being there sometimes and seeing all the things that go on and intimately involved. So thank you, Joan.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
I wanna recall from our last meeting, just one of the points of information that I believe was specific to the literacy education initiatives, in that unfortunately the numbers in terms of getting students on grade level was kind of flat. But there was a significant, I wanna say 17% decrease in chronic absenteeism. And if we're looking for reasons, I think that's an important one, given how much effort and energy and words have been spent on talking about the problem of absenteeism in our district. So there's something happening there, even if greater resources in terms of literacy education would always be useful.
I would just expand on that, Mr. Sprague, if I can, and just say that the numbers specific to literacy, so the numbers that was taken from, that was never a goal of the funding. That was just one of the benchmarks that we were looking at. But as a parent, I hope I don't get anyone in trouble, but as a parent of, I have children in the school district, I believe you're referencing the scores on the iReady test.
Is that what was presented?
And I have teachers tell me not to panic about the iReady test because it depends on the day. So take that data for what it's worth in terms of standardized testing, but that wasn't actually a goal of the programming. So if I were to show you specifics from a program that's targeted at early intervention for literacy, I think those numbers would be dramatically different.
Our goals of our community service programs are more related to at school, ready to learn, free of abuse and neglect, on track to graduate, out of the criminal justice system, mentally healthy. Those are the primary things. And like you referenced with attendance, it makes a difference if they have a secure place on a regular basis.
I call the question.
So the question has been called, and so we are voting on strategy 2 to approve funding for strategy 2. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. I think the ayes have it. So, but again, I think I want to be very clear and very sure. So if I could have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Stegerwald.
Mr. Alberts?
Aye.
Mr. Bogoditsky?
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal?
Abstain.
Mr. Manka?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Nay.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. So if I counted correctly, that would be 5 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstain, so that the ayes have it and the strategy is funded. Okay, so that is, concludes our conversation on the 2024-2025 Community Service Fund Levy. To be clear, according to our bylaws, our board meeting cannot last past 9 p.m. We are at 13 minutes to 9. So we can either just finish whatever agenda items we have left, and then when 9 o'clock hits, we will adjourn, and then we will go into our workshop, or somebody can make a motion to extend the time so we can complete the entire agenda and then move into the workshop. The board members have pleasure one way or the other?
How long is the workshop?
It's on standards-based grading. It was one that our school board asked us to present on. It could,
And we wanted
depending
to
on
have
your
it-
Really
interest.
important one, and for us to be doing it the wee hours of getting to be the wee hours of the night, is a struggle for me. I'm wondering if, it's an important one to have.
We can push the rest of these information items. There's nothing overly urgent about addressing them tonight.
Do we need a motion to do that?
In order to push them? What we could do is we could have a motion to table the information items to the next board meeting, recognizing that it is going to be a short board meeting. My thinking is we could dispose of 8.03 and 8.02 pretty quickly. 8.01 has some data and some analysis and some discussion. So my recommendation would be that we table 8.01 and then finish the rest. We can get that done pretty quickly.
I'd like to make a motion to table 8.01.
Okay, is there a
Second.
second? Dr. Sprague? Okay. So moved by Mr. Manka, seconded by Dr. Sprague to table 8.01, the results monitoring report R2.3 until our next board meeting. It is possible, we may have to table some items at that meeting because again, it'll be a 30-minute meeting, but at least it will show up on the board agenda for that date. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of tabling 8.01 until the next board meeting on September 9th? I believe that's the date, correct, Ms. Steigerwald? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion is carried. And I will move on to 8.02, Operational Expectation Monitoring Report OE9, communicating with the public and key stakeholders. So I believe this was the opportunity to present any changes to OE9. And I believe the changes that are listed are strictly the ones about removing the superintendent's interpretation.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
Mhm.
So any conversation, questions, comments on this one? Hearing none, then is there a motion to
It's non-action.
approve the, oh yeah, that's right.
There's no action. Yeah.
Just
There-
information.
Yeah, there is information. Thank you. 8.03. See, this is what happens when it gets late. 8.03, very quickly, please, if you have any suggestions for proposals for the Wisconsin Association of School Board for the 2025 resolutions, please get them to Ms. Steigerwald by September 5th, because then we need to discuss them on September 9th in order to meet WASB's deadline of September 15th. So,
May I ask,
yes.
sorry for interrupting, I realize I interrupted Dakin. May I ask, like, what's the purpose exactly of these proposals? Is bring it up to the WASB?
So we have a representative assembly, and do you want to talk about it?
Sure.
Ms.
So
Steigerwald?
the proposals that come from a number of school districts, some proposals come every year in our, well, the school districts put together proposals on what they'd like for legislatures, typically what these are about. These are legislative advocacy types of proposals. Then what will happen is, if our board passes them, then they go to the WASB,
Representative assembly,
nope, it go to
the committee?
a committee, and then the committee decides which ones go to the assembly. I can tell you that there were some pretty controversial issues that did not pass the committee last year, and then were brought to the assembly on the floor, which were very, I did not support, because I didn't, this board didn't give me any direction on those, and I didn't feel it was right to vote one way or the other. So that is that's how the process goes. But again, it's usually around legislative type of issues or changing the law. Sometimes it's about staffing, oftentimes it's about funding, sometimes it's about equity issues, things like that.
I think we can go on the WASB website and see some of the proposals that were presented in the previous year, so that could give you some ideas as to what is proposed, what comes forward, and then that may generate some ideas.
It's a range of things from curriculum and things about curriculum to
Staffing qualifications.
staffing qualifications,
Start of the school
funding
year.
models, you name it, it's in there. A lot of interesting stuff, and it has to meet the needs of all school districts in the state, so it's
Correct.
contentious.
So that information item was strictly just letting you all know that we've got a tight timeline on those. Okay? All right, so moving on to announcements. Ms. Berkedal, you got any?
Just a quick one. Speaking of the school year, so LPEF is busy connecting with students and staff to make sure that everyone knows how LPEF can support them throughout the school year. And they're excited to see grant projects in action this school year, like a new outdoor lit class at Logan High School and an adaptive book library at Inchin. And there's a cool author visit coming up at the high school for high school students this year with Candace Ilo. How do you say that? I-L-O-H? Whatever. Cool author coming.
Cool author.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay. For my announcements, as I stated earlier, our September 9th meeting will be 30 minutes at most. We do have a board training. Ms. Berkedal and I will be attending the Hogan Neighborhood Association meeting. They had requested some board members to present to their neighborhood association. And then the rest of the board will be here with our trainers on coherent governance. September 23rd, I will be out of town at a conference. But that meeting, we will present OE 11 in totality. So we will try to get that information to you previously to the board meeting so that you can digest it, so that the conversation that happens at the board meeting is very structured and focused, so that we're not reading through the entire thing, but really focusing in on those areas where there may be areas of acknowledgement, areas of maybe for more discussion. So we want to ensure that we try to get that through, because it is going to be a very large presentation. So please make sure that you read that document before the meeting.
Is that the information, or would that be the vote that time?
No, that would be the information.
Thank
So
you.
that's where all the conversation
Yep.
will happen.
Thank you.
Okay. And then just finally, a congratulations to Matt Wenthy, who has been given the distinguished honor of being a 2024 Viterbo University Distinguished Alumni. So he will be receiving that this fall. So congratulations to our HR Director, Matt Wenthy, on that. And so that's all I have, Dr. Engel?
We have start of year stuff coming up. We have our new professional staff onboarding tomorrow, one of the best days of the year. We have our all staff welcome on the 27th and staff development following. And of course, the first day of school for our traditional calendar on September 3rd. And speaking of acknowledgements from Viterbo, I don't know, Jim, if you've been recognized as a St. John the 23rd honoree for Viterbo as well. So
Congratulations.
congratulations.
So we have board debriefing. We can, if you would like to go
I can
for
make this
that,
brief.
Mr. Minka?
Yes. Yes. So I was writing things down throughout the board meeting. The first thing is, just as previous board meetings, we're getting really concise when it comes to our discussions with the referendum. It's now starting to get to the point where we're starting to get information sessions out there. I think we're talking about the referendum. We're staying on task. We're very well oriented. And then our meetings did go a little bit longer than what we expected, but I honestly would like to encourage that kind of debate. I think that was more so quality time well spent, and it got us a lot more closer to actually, I'd say, defining our focus on the board. So I'd like to thank you for the debate for that as well, and that's really all I have. There's not really anything else to talk about, maybe just to give another shout out to the information sessions. We can find that at the website. That's at the school board website, right? Where can we find that?
The referendum.
Correct.
Mhm.
But that's all I have.
Wonderful.
Does the board do anything for somebody like Jeannie Hallerson that was named Teacher of the Year type thing, was written up in the papers today? Does the board or somebody send her some thanks, great, congratulations?
We could absolutely initiate that from the board level if we wanted to.
I would think it'd be a good idea.
If I might, I think the discussion on Fund 80 was a good discussion. I think our time would have been better spent reviewing the two documents from Ms. Spraying rather than re-going through the PowerPoint that we looked at the workshop. I think that wasn't the best use of our time. But I think, again, I thought the documents we got from Ms. Spraying really honed into where the differences were and would have been better spent, use of our time, just my opinion.
I
We'll
mean,
make that note for next year.
all right, so with that, with 4 minutes to spare, we will adjourn. So we'll take 4 minutes as a quick break and then re-adjourn for our workshop. So this meeting, the regular board meeting is adjourned.